Chapter 335. If you want to kill me, just do it. Good luck. Humph. In the face of Faceless One's ridicule, Ferdinand angrily snorted and then suppressed his anger with great patience. Although he had never personally experienced the fourth trial of the champion, he knew the general outline. In that trial, the fighting ability was not important. What was important was the ability to deal with all kinds of emergencies, as well as the ability to flexibly use the rules to attack the opponent. In this regard, Wang Lu's performance in the first 3 trials was enough to frighten people. The only one who could compete with Wang Lu in this regard was Faceless One. Therefore, he must restrain himself. Faceless One, what are your odds of winning against that Wang Lu? Faceless One completely didn't know how to appreciate kindness. He sneered and said, "Ridiculous question. If I say I have no 10%, will you give up? If I say I have 100%, will you believe me? Don't be so shameless." Just as the situation became more and more rigid, a gentle voice suddenly came in. "Faceless, I also want to know this question. Is it convenient for you to explain it to me?" Hearing this voice, even Faceless One was surprised. The Pope? On the other hand, Paul and Ferdinand bowed at the first instant, not daring to delay at all. Although they were all legendary figures, the Pope, as the number 1 person in Holy Light religion, was also likely the existence closest to the God realm in the entire Western continent, thus, his status was far higher than other legendary figures. "No need to be so polite, I'm just an avatar projection. I came here to understand the situation. Faceless, what card do you have in your hand?" Paul and Ferdinand both looked at Faceless One. Since the Pope personally asked, presumably he would not dare to conceal it. However, Faceless One still shook his head. "I can't say it, because it would be meaningless." "Impudent!" Ferdinand angrily shouted. In the doctrine of Holy Light religion, the Pope was the personification of the Sea of Holy Light. Being disrespectful to the Pope could be described as the greatest blasphemy. The Pope himself was exceptionally magnanimous. "No harm, since you don't want to say it, then forget it." However, this time's action, Faceless One disdainfully said, "Do you think I need you to remind me? If I was like these 2 idiots who needed reminders for everything, I wouldn't be alive today." Ha ha ha. Regarding Faceless One's impudence, the Pope unexpectedly laughed in relief. "Good, very good. I can finally leave this place to you without any worries." Faceless One waved his hand. "Get the hell out of here. You shouldn't be so relaxed that you have the leisure to come here to show off, right?" The Pope nodded, and the avatar projection gradually dissipated. Beside Faceless One, the administrator of the king's treasure house and the supreme inquisitor were stunned. In this world, there was actually someone who dared to speak to the Pope like that? As the leader of Holy Light religion, the Pope paid great attention to maintaining the dignity of himself and the Church. Anyone who dared to speak disrespectfully in front of him would be severely and justly punished. Even the high-ranking Archbishop of the Church was no exception. They had once seen with their own eyes a cardinal who was a powerful figure in a region. In front of the Pope's scepter, that cardinal vanished in a puff of smoke. Just because, when he met the Pope, he intentionally used the wrong honorific to test and challenge the authority of the Pope. The Pope's strictness was absolute. The only exception was this scene before them. This was the first time they saw the Pope indulging a person to such an extent that they couldn't help but wonder, what was the relationship between this mysterious Faceless One and the Pope? Could it be? Faceless One lightly said, "I am the Pope." "What? That's impossible." "Humph, 2 idiots." Faceless One coldly snorted. "Enough, get ready to enter the trial passage. The 4th level is about to begin." Phew, this time the stairs are so long. Standing on the long stairs leading to the 4th level, Wang Lu stopped and somewhat wearily sighed. "Let's take a break here." With that, he directly sat cross-legged on the ground and divided part of his mind to meditate and restore his magical power. Aya and the others looked at him with a slightly strange look. Was Wang Lu tired? He was indeed tired. Although in the eyes of outsiders, Wang Lu's first 3 levels were simply an understatement, like a hot knife through butter, but as the person involved, Wang Lu did not look as relaxed as it seemed. The first 3 levels were indeed very fast, but each level was like walking on a tightrope. A little bit of carelessness and he would fall into a bottomless abyss. For example, in the first level, the fake wine cup, the guardian of the stone gate, relying on his obsession, increased his strength for thousands of years and was already close to the legendary level. With a roar, he could sweep away all the clouds in the sky within a radius of 100 miles. If a fight really broke out, how long could the Night King, who was not even as good as the salted egg Superman, resist? In the second level, the labyrinth, Wang Lu crushed all the way with his original magical ability, digging through the walls and digging through the ground in an inhumane straight line. However, how could the danger of defending the space barrier of the king's treasure house be ordinary? A little bit of carelessness would cause the suppression of the entire treasure house, and Wang Lu's mere Shudan-level magical ability would immediately collapse. As for the third level, using the fake gold medal to deter the Golden Guardians, it was also a risky move. If Tuna's control over the army exceeded his expectation, he would immediately make a fool of himself. Perhaps he could persist for a while with his non-phase sword's heaven-defying defense, but his tower defense strategy would completely collapse. Without the defense tower, in the face of hundreds of tireless Golden Guardians, Wang Lu would not be able to persist until the end. In every level, he almost risked his life. Moreover, every time, he personally stood on the front line. Although it seemed easy, the pressure was real. Even if Wang Lu's psychological quality was good, it was inevitable that he would be somewhat tired. "Senior brother, are you tired?" Lu Li cautiously asked. Wang Lu touched her head and said with a smile, "Tired? What a joke, I can fight you for 300 rounds at any time. Lu Li, you don't have to worry about me, you just have to be obedient and take care of yourself, understand?" Lu Li nodded. "I know, Master said the same thing before we went down the mountain. Be good, when we get back, I'll treat you to a big meal." According to the usual practice, the dialogue between the brothers and sisters should end here. However, this time, Lu Li hesitated for a moment and then suddenly asked, "Senior brother, can you assign me more tasks? I have become stronger than before." Wang Lu gawked for a moment. He didn't expect Lu Li to say such a thing. After thinking for a moment, Wang Lu looked at her from head to toe and then nodded in praise. "I haven't paid attention to you for a while, but you're indeed a bit bigger, in sharp contrast to a certain person who couldn't grow for more than 100 years. Aya closed her eyes. "Is that person in sharp contrast referring to me?" Wang Lu comforted her. "Don't mind it, you're also of rare value." Then he turned around and said to Lu Li, "This doesn't seem like a request that you would make. Lu Li, did you experience something some time ago?" Lu Li thought for a moment. "I found a dessert shop in Dragon City." Around them, Aya and Bai Shixian couldn't help but smile. If it were someone else, this kind of unclear thinking pattern would certainly give them a headache. However, when it came to Lu Li, they couldn't find it annoying. And according to Wang Lu's theory, the reason for this was very simple, because Lu Li was too beautiful. In addition to the dessert shop, there's also a barbecue game that's also very good. It's just opposite the dessert shop. In addition, Lu Li's eyes shone as she recollected her memories. Wang Lu frowned. "Wait a minute, I asked the wrong question. How about this, you write down the recipes for the past month for me, in chronological order from the back to the front. Don't forget to write down the water you drink." Lu Li let out an "oh" sound and didn't ask why. She just honestly wrote it down. As a sword cultivator, her fingers and wrist were extremely nimble. In a twinkling of an eye, she had filled several sheets of paper and finally finished writing down the recipes for the first morning. Aya couldn't help but shake her head and then curiously asked, "What's wrong? Why are you so serious?" During this period of time, Lu Li's progress is indeed great. Soon, she can try the king pill, so it's normal for her to be proactive. Wang Lu said, "Don't think that I'm making a fuss about nothing. Lu Li's brilliant sword heart has been cultivated to this day. Her whole person is pure and spotless, the same inside and out. However, on the other hand, even a trace of dust would be particularly conspicuous. With her character, she goes with the flow and doesn't care about the outside world. In addition to food and immortal cultivation, have you ever seen her take the initiative to ask for anything? Especially after she came to the Western continent, she was entrusted by the elders on the mountain to listen to my instructions in everything. Therefore, she never takes the initiative to ask for anything. It's really hard to imagine that she would say those words for no reason. So that's how it is." Aya looked at Wang Lu's serious expression and inwardly sighed. Wang Lu really doted on Lu Li. Moreover, he took good care of her. However, a girl like Lu Li would, of course, be likable. Therefore, it was natural for Wang Lu to like her. Before long, Lu Li had written a thick stack of paper from memory. 1 month's recipes were all listed on it. Not even a cup of water was left out. Wang Lu picked up the recipe and carefully reviewed it. His reading speed was very fast. In just a cup of tea time, he had finished reading hundreds of pages of paper. He closed his eyes and sorted out his thoughts for a moment. Then, he opened one of the pages, pointed to a line of words and asked, "Lu Li, on this day, which is the day when we just won the Blood Holy Nights in Dragon City, I gave you a holiday to eat and drink in the commercial district. But, what's with this drink?" Aya leaned over to take a look and saw that Lu Li's diet record was very detailed. In addition to what she ate and drank, even the time she used to eat was clearly written. This memory was really admirable. And at the place where Wang Lu pointed, it was written, "A cup of cold drink from a kind-hearted person. X hour X minute to X hour X minute." What's wrong with this paragraph? Wang Lu said, "There are 2 problems. First, I told her that the food given by strangers must not be eaten or even touched easily. I don't think Lu Li would disobey my order for no reason. Second, it took too long. How could it take so long to drink a cup of drink?" Aya laughed in spite of herself. Of course, a drink needs to be tasted slowly, not drunk. Wang Lu coldly said, "What kind of person do you think Lu Li is? It's not like you haven't seen her eat." Chapter 336. For Wang Lu's rebuttal, Aya was suddenly speechless. Lu Li's table manners were not ugly. Obviously, when she was a child, she was carefully corrected by her master. Every movement seemed quiet and elegant, as long as the speed was slowed down by 100 times. Moreover, although Lu Li had a good appreciation for food, she was actually not picky. Except for the extremely difficult to swallow, Aya automatically excluded the dishes that she cooked. No matter what, she would eat it with relish. Her eating speed had always been jaw-dropping. Although the 2 problems pointed out by Wang Lu were slightly far-fetched, they were indeed doubtful points. Lu Li, what happened at that time? Lu Li was very calm. Although the kind-hearted magician told her not to mention it to her senior brother, since her senior brother asked, she, of course, would not hide it. Therefore, each of them played 2 roles, retelling the dialogue at that time word for word. Even the tone of the magician was imitated vividly. After listening to this conversation, anyone could tell that there was a problem. Is this a psychological attack? Wang Lu sneered. Obviously, if you want to target me, the best way is to target Lu Li. And if you want to target Lu Li, general psychological attack will not be effective. Although Lu Li was natural, she was not an idiot. Moreover, after many years of training by her master Zhou Ming, as well as long-term training by Wang Lu, she had a very strong resistance to general psychological attack. It was almost impossible to trigger her negative emotions, to make her feel guilty, to make her waver, to make her confused. She didn't have those negative emotions at all. But what if it's from the front? Using sacrifice, dedication, and winning the love of others to induce her thinking, after all, she is not invulnerable. Brilliant sword heart. Once something happens to Liu Li, it will be a fatal blow to me. Fatal blow? Aya looked at Wang Lu with a bit of surprise. Does he mean to say that he has already? Wang Lu said, for me, I can accept anyone else in the team if something happens to them, except for Lu Li. She must not have an accident. If something happens to the others, the most I can do is take responsibility as the leader. At worst, I can just say that I made a mistake in using people. Because none of you are children, you all have the ability to stand on your own and know how to take care of yourselves. However, Lu Li was different. In this strange continent, there was no way for her to survive alone. This was different from the experiential learning of the Lingjian school disciples. According to Uncle Zhou Ming's original intention, he was opposed to Lu Li coming to the Western continent before the completion of the King Pill. It was my strong advocacy that persuaded Uncle Zhou Ming to agree. During this period, Lu Li was entrusted by her uncle to trust me unreservedly. She would not violate anything, nor would she overstep anything, fearing that something would go wrong. Therefore, by the same logic, I have to bear the responsibility of taking care of her safety. After listening to Wang Lu's explanation, Aya was quite touched. Responsibility was one of the many virtues that Aya valued the most. More than 100 years ago, when her country was torn apart and she herself suffered heavy losses, it was her sense of responsibility for Bretonia that drove her to continue to walk on as a spirit of the brave departed until today. And the people that she most appreciated were precisely those who had a strong sense of responsibility. After Wang Lu finished his explanation, he said to Lu Li, forget that person's words, don't remember a single word. Lu Li gawked for a moment, but she still didn't ask anything and just nodded. I understand, I will forget it. Good girl. Wang Lu touched the girl's head. Now that you've rested enough, let's continue our journey. Before long, the group of people came to the end of the stairs. The situation was very similar to the previous 3 levels. Behind the stairs was a small square, and a gray stone gate blocked the way. However, unlike the previous levels, the surface of the stone gate and the rock walls on both sides were engraved with a large number of murals. When Wang Lu and the others approached, a wave-like ripple appeared on the stone door, which then formed a vague human face and said in a very stiff and rigid voice, "Welcome to the brave challengers. This time, you are not facing the guardian of the Golden King, but a challenger like you. They have the same powerful strength as you, and the same cunning wisdom. It's very difficult, but if you want to be the champion of the Golden King, you must prove that your strength is stronger than your competitors." Wang Lu asked, "How do you prove it?" "Go to the top of beautiful unique Pool Peak and pick up the Sun God Stone, then you can prove your qualification." Beautiful unique Pool Peak. Sun God Stone? Listening to these 2 completely unfamiliar terms, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel strange. He then looked back at Aya. As a scholar of the Western continent, if there was something strange in this land, it would not be wrong to ask her. Aya recalled for a moment. The era of the Golden King has passed for too long. During this period, there have been many changes in the continent. There are many changes in the terrain, and there are also many places with completely different names. The name Beautiful Unique Pool Peak, I have an impression of 4 or 5 places. However, if I'm not mistaken, the most famous one is located in the savage land that is even more distant than the Ice Thorns Plateau. There are countless miracles and mysteries there. However, even I know very little about the specific story. The Stone Gate said with a sinking voice, "If you want to know about Beautiful Unique Pool Peak and the Sun God Stone, then carefully look at the murals here, which record everything." With that, the Stone Gate burst out a ray of light, which lit up all the murals on both sides of the rock wall and the surface of the Stone Gate. Thousands of murals, as if they were alive, rotated to form a moving image in front of Wang Lu. At the same time, the Stone Gate issued a dull sound as a narration. "TSK, is this the original version of a documentary?" The murals told a story that happened tens of thousands of years ago. At that time, the Golden King had not yet completely ruled the continent, and the Golden Kingdom was surrounded by countless enemies. Golden King raised his army and went on an expedition in all directions. His army was invincible, but it also experienced a lot of bitter battles. One of the battles could be described as the one that determined the fate of the Golden King. After winning 13 battles in a row, he was about to lead his exhausted army back to the capital. However, in the rear of the Golden Kingdom, his former ally suddenly turned against him. Taking advantage of the fact that Golden King was on an expedition, he launched a surprise attack. Thousands of troops and horses went straight to the capital, which put the Golden Kingdom in a precarious situation. At the time of crisis, Golden King resolutely made a decision. He abandoned his army and single-handedly returned to the capital. As one of the strongest people on the continent at that time, it was much faster to act alone than to lead an army, although it was also much more dangerous. At that time, many people thought that Golden King was crazy and actually courted his own death, but later it turned out that it was his bravest and wisest decision. He acted alone and rushed back to the capital one step ahead of the enemy. Relying on his years of prestige, he quickly formed an army and launched a desperate fight against the enemy. In the attack and defense of the capital, he personally went out and killed the enemy's leader, which established the victory. Then, his army marched straight in, wiped out the ally who betrayed him, and burned his country in a raging flame. However, Golden King was not satisfied, because the man who personally ordered the attack on his country did not die, but led his personal guards to flee to the wilderness. The wasteland was a dead end, but he would rather die than fall into the hands of Golden King. However, Golden King was not willing to let him go. He would rather take the same risk to go deep into the wasteland and catch his enemy. It was a pursuit war with death. The two sides scrambled to go deep into the land of death. The deeper they went into the wilderness, the more dangerous the environment was, because it was an absolutely unknown place that no one had ever explored before. The enemy of Golden King was one of the most skilled escapees in the continent. No one knew how long Golden King chased him before he finally caught him and punished him with the cruelest means. The murals used hundreds of pages to describe the cruel means of Golden King in detail. Obviously, it was also the proudest work of Golden King in his life. Previously, when Golden King turned the tide and led his army to defeat the enemy, he only used 2 or 3 paintings to describe it. But the story did not end there, because when the enemy was tortured and on the verge of death, he made a bold move. The Grey Guardian of the Stone Gate tried to imitate the tone of the enemy with a dull and rigid voice. "Gil, do you think you have conquered everything? Do you think your power can cover the whole continent? Open your eyes and see. Look around us, look at the endless distance, look at the mountain that runs through the sky. Before that, we never even knew that there was such a vast space in the continent. This is a strange and mysterious land, and you, as a small, lowly mortal, can never conquer it all. This continent is far more vast than you think, and you are far from being as supreme as you think you are." For the enemy's provocation, Golden King gave the highest profile response. "Ridiculous bastard, how dare you question my authority? This land, no matter how vast it is just my back garden. If there is any strange corner in my back garden, I will conquer it. Gil, you are always so brilliant, always so confident, as if everything in the world is under your control. Unfortunately, this is just an illusion. You are just a mortal. Compared with this world, your lifespan, everything about you is insignificant. You can't conquer everything. Gil, how about this? If you can really conquer that mountain, I will tell you the reason why I betrayed you. I don't care about the bastard's excuse." With that, Golden King crushed his head and then turned his eyes to the mountain hidden in the clouds. "But, nothing in this world can be separated from my rule. The mountain hidden in the sea of clouds, you will become my possession." At the end of the story, it described how Golden King went through untold hardships to cross the sea of clouds and climb to the peak. Golden King finally picked a magical gem at the top of the mountain. The power of the gem made him immortal and completely established his 1,000-year achievement. And that mountain was regarded by Golden King as a symbol of his omnipotence, named after the word Beautiful Unique Pool Peak, which symbolized the supreme in the ancient language. Challengers, follow in the footsteps of the king, climb the beautiful unique Pool Peak, and pick the Sun God Stone. Of course, all of this must be done before your challengers. With that, the image of the mural disappeared completely, and the stone gate became silent. Chapter 337. When the stone gate finished the mural demonstration, the group fell into a long silence. It was indeed an interesting story, but the point was obviously not that story. Among the more than 1,000 murals, Golden King used 99% of them to describe how he turned the tide and established his extraordinary feats, which fully showed his love of luxury and show-off. However, among those murals, only a few of them were really related to the road to the champion's trial. Moreover, most of them were used to show the wisdom and bravery of the king. As for how Golden King broke through the sea of clouds and climbed to the peak, there was no mention of it. The available information was almost zero. It seems like we can only rely on ourselves. After thinking for a while, Wang Lu came to this conclusion. These murals are really interesting. Rather than saying that Golden King is taking the opportunity to show off, I think it's more like he is deliberately concealing his adventure. It seems that there's something unbearable in the sea of clouds. But then again, climbing the beautiful unique pool peak and picking the sun god stone. Is it the real beautiful unique pool peak? Or is it just a replica of Golden King, similar to the rockery and potted plants in the back garden? Moreover, why would he deliberately design such a trial? It's really thought-provoking. Aya worriedly said, compared to the intention of Golden King, I'm more worried about the challenger mentioned by the stone gate. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the administrator of Holy Light Religion, right? In this trial, he will personally compete with us, but this kind of competition is very disadvantageous to us, because the information between the two sides is completely asymmetric. He has completed this trial a long time ago, so now he's very familiar with it. However, we have to start from scratch, and we have no idea what kind of difficulties we will encounter. Wang Lu said, that's normal. The other side is the defending champion, so it's inevitable that there will be preferential treatment. But isn't this a common thing? Whether it's you or me, we all have the experience of leapfrog challenge. The opponent we met has a longer cultivation time than us, a higher stage than us, and even more complete equipment. No matter from which aspect, it's an unfair fight, but we still won all the way until now. So what does it matter if it's fair or not? That's right, it's just. Aya laughed in spite of herself. I can't believe it's you who encourages me. Wang Lu laughed. I'm your gigolo. At the same time, in front of another stone door, several people in holy robes had just finished looking at the murals. Really, we have already seen it once, but he still forced us to see it again. Golden King's habit of showing off has not changed even after his death. Standing at the head of the team, Paul sighed. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, showing a somewhat relaxed look. And behind him, in addition to Faceless One and Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand, there were 5 other Archbishop-level priests. They were the Pope's personal guards. Under the Pope's instruction, they joined as assistants in this operation to ensure that the operation would be foolproof. The addition of these people greatly boosted Paul's confidence. After all, no matter what, the opponents were just a few young people whose real strength was barely comparable to a high-order intermediate profession. As for the Night King's heroic spirit, if she still had her peak strength, she might be very difficult to deal with, but now she was no longer a threat. In terms of strength, Holy Light Religion occupied an absolute advantage. The reason why those blasphemers were able to smoothly pass the first 3 levels was not because of their strength, but because in the face of the rigid checkpoints, they were able to devise tricks. However, in the 4th level, the opponent became a living person, so everything became a pure competition of strength. There was no possibility of using tricks. Moreover, the strength advantage was only one of them. In fact, in the 4th level, strength was not the key to victory. What really made Paul feel that the victory was in his grasp was the advantage in experience. After going in, everyone pay attention to my footsteps. Before arriving at beautiful unique pool peak, there is a chaotic sea of clouds, which is a space with chaotic laws. You will often encounter a unique law suppression. For example, some places prohibit the existence of fire elements, so no one can light a fire. Some places prohibit the trial participants from speaking, and violators will die without a doubt. And these laws cannot be broken by brute force, so you can only seriously abide by them. In the past, even with the power of Golden King, he had to follow the rules step by step. During this period, he lost his way several times and was in a sorry state. Therefore, that experience was not recorded on the murals. And the last time, we were able to smoothly pass it, which was somewhat due to luck. Paul did not mention the role of Faceless One and instead encouraged the team's morale. But this time, we are already familiar with the road. Even after more than 80 years, I still remember every step of this level. From stepping into the sea of clouds to arriving at beautiful unique Pool Peak, I am confident that I will not make the slightest mistake. Therefore, you can rest assured to follow me and listen to my orders. Although it is not the real Sun God stone, it is an imitation made by Golden King to commemorate his great achievements, and its value is not below that of a sacred tool. Therefore, perhaps we should thank those blasphemers. Without them, I have no way to restart this level. Paul said, laughed, and then took the lead to walk through the stone door. However, at this time, they heard Faceless One, who stood at the end of the team, sarcastically said, "It sounds like you already have the victory in your hands?" Ridiculous. The characteristic of idiots is that they are habitually brainless optimistic. I'm really looking forward to seeing you hysterically shout, "This is impossible." Paul turned his head and angrily said, "Faceless, if you're afraid, you can shut up and stay outside the door." Afraid? Faceless One frivolously said with a smile, "I'm indeed afraid. I'm afraid that when the time comes, you will cry endlessly, kneel down and beg me for help, and conveniently rub your snot on my shoes." Paul was ashamed and angry at the same time. Enough. Don't think that just because you had some performance in the champion's trial that you can look down on everyone. It was thanks to your help that I cleared the trial last time, but I've already memorized all the steps to clear the trial. It doesn't matter whether I have you or not. In this level, you don't have any qualification to tell me what to do. Oh, what an unyielding, messy speech, it's simply touching. Faceless One sarcastically smiled and then reached out his hand. Then let's wait and see. Yes, let's wait and see. You will definitely pay for your arrogance and rudeness. In resentment, Paul led the team into the stone door. Everyone felt that the scenery in front of them changed. A vast sea of clouds appeared in front of them, and on the other side of the sea of clouds was a towering mountain that pierced the sky. Beautiful unique Pool Peak, the symbol of the authority of the Golden King, was everywhere. They stood on a floating island, surrounded by the vast sea of clouds. Once they stepped out of the island, it meant that they had officially set foot on the road to the mountain, and they had to face the murderous intent of the chaotic sea of clouds. According to Paul's memory, the best way to start should be to take the first step in a rock crevice, and a rock crevice, With a hint of surprise, Paul began to carefully observe the surrounding scenery. However, a moment later, his heart was frightened and he subconsciously took a few steps back. Here, what is this place? Compared with the narrow but familiar island in his memory, the land under his feet, although also narrow and depressing, had almost no other characteristics. Even the color of the land was completely different. And when he looked again, the angle of the distant beautiful unique Pool Peak was also completely different from his memory. In other words, the starting point is different from the last time. This. Paul stared with wide eyes, sweating profusely. His dry lips opened and closed, but he couldn't spit out a word. What is this? Is this impossible? An idiot is an idiot. Faceless One's voice seemed so harsh at this time. I've always wondered, where did you get the confidence to think that everything will be exactly the same as the last time? Even if you are as stupid as a pig or a dog, you should know that the two trials can't have the same process. Even if we don't consider the unpredictable nature of the chaotic sea of clouds, last time there was only one group of challengers, but this time there are two groups. the focus of the entire trial has changed. And you actually think that everything will be exactly the same as the last time. Listening to Faceless One's ridicule, Paul felt blood rushing to his face, but he couldn't say a word. Faceless One, continuing to laugh at Paul will not help our action. The Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand interrupted Faceless One with a sinking voice. You will lead the team to do what you want to do. Paul was startled. Ferdinand, enough, idiot. Don't you think your appearance is ugly enough? I didn't come here to see how you make a fool of yourself. Hurry up and end this trial and purify the blasphemer. Faceless One laughed. Ha ha ha, no wonder those Easterners often say that fresh flowers need green leaves to set them off. Compared with that idiot Paul, this idiot, actually look a bit more pleasing to the eye. With that, Faceless One took the lead and his figure directly submerged into the clouds. However, before he could take 2 steps, a cry of alarm suddenly came from the clouds. Come here, quickly. Upon hearing Faceless One's cry, the others were startled. What kind of situation could make this arrogant and lawless guy cry out in alarm? Did he encounter Wang Lu and the others? Without thinking too much, they flew into the sea of clouds. However, just as their bodies were wrapped in the clouds, they felt their whole body sink. The intense holy light that filled their bodies instantly dimmed, as if they were being suppressed by an unknown force. Their strength was reduced to less than 1/10. This is. Paul and Ferdinand were not the only ones who were shocked. The 5 archbishops who had been nurtured by the Pope as death warriors were also horrified. It was because a large part of the power they relied on the most had been destroyed for no apparent reason. Faceless One, what's going on here? Ferdinand's voice seemed a bit weak. This legendary level Holy One, at this time, was actually weakened to the intermediate high order. Moreover, even after exhausting all means, he still couldn't recover it. He had experienced great winds and waves in his life, but this was the first time he encountered such a strange situation. Faceless One laughed, spread out his hands and said, Paul should have explained to you before that in the sea of clouds, the suppression of the law is everywhere. And now, the suppression that we have to bear is that once we enter, our strength will at most be retained at the intermediate high order profession level. King Ghost Place. Ferdinand cursed, and then his sharp eyes pierced Faceless One. You already knew it would be like this? Faceless One said, I knew it the first time I stepped into the sea of clouds. Otherwise, why would I tell you to come quickly? If I hadn't lured you here by surprise, after knowing the situation here, you would definitely hesitate outside, and we don't have that much time to waste. What did you say? I mean, if we don't hurry up, we won't have a chance. This sea of clouds with unpredictable law seems to be tailor-made for him. Although Faceless One was stating an urgent fact, his tone was calm. Halfway through, he suddenly turned his head. Oh, by the way, the nail I buried in that girl's body should have been discovered, right? Chapter 338. At the same time, at the other end of the chaotic sea of clouds, a team of challengers was quietly walking in the clouds. The crisp impact of their footsteps on the flagstone ground continued to reverberate in the gray haze, as if they were in a closed and depressing hall. Wang Lu, do you feel that the air here is a bit depressing? In the silence, Aya suddenly opened her mouth. A bit depressing? Wang Lu wrinkled his nose and sniffed. Do you want to say that in the treasure house of Golden King, this dictatorship ruler, there is a lack of democracy and freedom? I don't know what you're talking about. Aya sighed. What I want to say is, in this place, it seems that the power of the profession is suppressed. Moreover, the suppression comes from the law of origin, and there is simply no way to resist. Wang Lu was surprised. Is there such a thing? I didn't notice it at all. Nanfei's method was not known for its sensitivity, but his void spirit root was the most sensitive physique in the world. Although he had to experience the transformation of the law on the Western continent, it was not to the extent that he didn't know it when he was in a place with the law of suppression. Is the suppression serious? Wang Lu asked. Fortunately, here, it seems that our power level is suppressed to intermediate high order, that is, around Yuanying stage. Aya said, fortunately, I'm not in a good state, so I'm not greatly affected. What about you? Aren't you asking the obvious? Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then sighed. Although I'm not even the king pill, when you said it like that, I have a complex feeling of being a well-known writer being stuffed with a child's ticket. In short, this place doesn't seem to want us to have too strong individual strength, but for a mere intermediate high order to explore the sea of clouds that even Golden King would find tricky, it's really too much. Aya frowned, extremely puzzled. Moreover, what is the significance of this restriction? Wang Lu said, at present, the biggest significance is to play the role of novice protection, because this restriction is very advantageous for a weak team like us, but absolutely disadvantageous for Holy Light religion. In order to deal with us, they must have gathered their most powerful team. I'm afraid they even have more than one legendary rank. Unfortunately, all of them are now wasted. Aya asked, do you think someone did this on purpose? For example. Wang Lu hesitated and said, from the result, it does seem that Golden King is deliberately taking care of us. After all, if we win, it will be more beneficial to him. However, it was hard to imagine that this kind of thinking pattern would be the thinking pattern of Golden King. With his character, perhaps he would disdain to play this kind of small trick to suppress one side and elevate the other side. If we want to win the championship and seize the administrator's position, we must use our own strength to prove our qualifications within the established framework. Moreover, in my impression, although Golden King is cruel and heartless, he has never been regarded as nepotism. He doesn't even recognize his own family. Aya sighed. That's true. I don't think someone as proud as the Golden King would use such a cheap trick. Forget it. I'll think about things I can't figure out later. This is a long journey, and the truth will eventually be revealed. While the two were talking softly, Bai Shishuan's voice suddenly came from the front. Senior brother, Aya, please come and take a look. Wang Lu and Aya looked at each other and then quickly walked to the front of the team. They saw Bai Shishuan standing there with a puzzled look. Beside her, as the pathfinder, Quan Zouhua, uneasily shook his fur, looked straight ahead, and made a gurgling sound from his throat. And in front of them, in the thick haze, there was a vague shadow of a huge castle. This is a castle? Aya was surprised. How could there be a castle here? Beautiful unique Pool Peak is located at the edge of the wasteland, a place where no human has lived for tens of thousands of years in the Western continent. How could there be such a mark of human civilization? Is it the legacy of Golden King? In the process of crossing the Sea of Clouds, did he build a castle as a palace? Aya's speculation was in line with Golden King's extravagant temperament, but this speculation was quickly denied by her. No, although this castle is huge, its style is too simple. If it was Golden King, he would not build it so crudely. Either he didn't build it, or he built it to be dazzling. Moreover, this castle always gives people an unfathomable feeling. Its history seems to be very long, longer than any era that we know. Aya said, and her attention was gradually attracted by the castle. Hidden in the haze, the castle was like an observer that had experienced the vicissitudes of life for hundreds of millions of years, indifferently watching everything around it. Its cold figure made people shudder, but it also contained an irresistible mysterious charm. Bai Shishuan asked, Senior brother, do you want to go and take a look? Of course, we can't just turn a blind eye to it. After walking for so long, this castle is the only clue. Previously, when the group of people entered the fourth level through the stone gate, they were immediately swallowed by the thick clouds and instantly lost all their vision. Not to mention the once clearly distinguishable beautiful unique Pool Peak that stood on the other side of the Sea of Clouds. Wang Lu looked down and couldn't even see his own feet. This isolation of perception not only came from the physical level, but also from the chaotic Sea of Clouds, which contained a very special force that severely limited the perception of the challengers. Without perception, there was no other reference in the Sea of Clouds, plus the disordered space here, so it was impossible to locate them. In Wang Lu's view, this was like an invisible barrier that bound them to only go to the designated place. Therefore, when the castle appeared, Wang Lu immediately made a judgment that they must enter the castle. Because if they missed such an obvious clue, they would likely be lost in the sea of clouds forever. After Wang Lu led the crowd to the castle gate slowly opened, revealing a faint light, as if the castle was coldly welcoming them. Following the direction of the light, the group of people cautiously entered the castle. When Aya, who was at the back, also stepped through the door, the heavy and huge castle door suddenly closed, and then disappeared into the thick fog that suddenly appeared. Aya very vigilantly turned around and swung her sword. The more than 3 feet long stone sword swept backward, but it only hit empty air. The sharp sword chi tore through the clouds, creating a hundreds of meters long tumble, but there was no trace of the castle gate. The gate is gone. Wang Lu was not surprised. It means to let us move forward and not look back. Okay, then let's see what is in this castle. After an hour. Senior brother, we've also explored the second floor. The structure is similar to the first floor. It's a winding corridor with 10 rooms on each side. Each room leads to a different plane, and each of them contains very rich resources. Bai Shixian reported in a soft voice. She was also holding a few crystal stones that could record images and sounds. This is the video recording of me and Luli when we explored separately. Please review it, senior brother. Wang Lu waved his hand. No need to look at it. Since the structure is similar to the first floor, I'm afraid the content is also similar. There are a total of 80 rooms on the 2 floors, leading to 80 different places. Each independent plane is rich in 1 or 2 kinds of resources. This castle is like a warehouse, a transit station. It allows us to make sufficient preparations before embarking on the real journey. As Wang Lu said this, he looked at the tightly closed gate not far away. His brows gradually wrinkled, and his eyes turned sharp. Get ready to break through the fog blockade outside the door. Behind the door was an absolute blockade of fog. It was not difficult to open the door. Although it was thick and solid and could not be destroyed by brute force, as long as the right position was used, it could be pushed open. But after pushing open the door, it was so thick that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Stepping inside was like walking into a different dimensional space. No matter how hard they tried to move forward, they couldn't get more than 3 feet away from the door. Wang Lu let everyone in the team try it. After walking out of the door, it was like being possessed. No matter how hard they struggled, they couldn't move forward. The law of space seemed to be imprisoned. In addition to this door, there were 80 rooms inside the castle. Although each led to a different area, each of them was a dead end, which was not the direction they should go. Therefore, the situation temporarily fell into a deadlock. Sort out your thoughts, Wang Lu. After finishing the exploration of a room on the first floor, I returned to the hall on the first floor, exhausted. Now we seem to be trapped. There were only 2 doors leading to the outside world. One was the entrance, which disappeared into the sea of clouds after Wang Lu and the others entered. The other was the obstacle that they needed to break through. Both seemed to be dead ends. Wang Lu said, according to the current situation, the meaning of this level should be that we need to find something in these 80 rooms before we can move forward. I have just found something similar to sesame in the room of crops, but it seems to be completely useless. Aya completely couldn't understand Wang Lu's obsession with sesame, so she had to say, do you want to take a part of the resources in these 80 rooms and try them one by one? It's the most inefficient and the stupidest method. But if there's no other clue, we can only try it first. As a professional adventurer, Wang Lu always hated the inefficient method. However, if there was no other way, he would not insist on it. After all, even the stupidest method was better than hesitation. However, just as Wang Lu was about to mobilize the crowd to collect resources, Lu Li's cheerful laughter suddenly came from above his head. Ha ha ha, senior brother, I found 2 paintings. 2 paintings? Wang Lu's curiosity was immediately piqued. With a tap of his foot, he flew toward the direction of Lu Li's voice. The clouds and mist were everywhere in the 4th level. Even inside the castle, if they were far away, they would be shrouded by the clouds and mist. Although this castle only had 2 floors, the space of each floor was very wide. Wang Lu flew for hundreds of meters before he saw the ceiling of the 1st floor and the excited Lu Li. Senior brother, look, there are 2 paintings here. They are really beautiful. Wang Lu looked at the direction of Lu Li's finger, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Lu Li, you've made a great contribution. Chapter 339. The 2 paintings pointed out by Lu Li were the legacy of Golden King. As for why Wang Lu could be sure, it was because the 2 paintings were made of pure gold. The glittering golden light was enough to blind a dog's eyes. In this world, except for Golden King, probably no one would be obsessed with gold to this extent, even carving a mural out of pure gold. The 2 paintings that Golden King left here were painted on the top of the exit gate. With his character, if he wanted to leave a painting, of course, he would leave it on the top. Because the gate was too high, the top was hidden in the clouds, so no one noticed it before. Only a bored person like Lu Li could find it. Both murals showed quite exquisite painting skills, but what was really worth paying attention to was the content. Both paintings were self-portraits of Golden King. On the left, Golden King personally built a shining golden chariot, and on the right, Golden King cut through the sea of clouds with irresistible force. It was difficult to say whether these 2 murals were clues left by Golden King or simply showing off. In the painting, Golden King himself was radiant. Whether it was waving the forging hammer to build the chariot or driving the chariot forward, his domineering aura was simply overflowing. However, Wang Lu soon discovered the problem with these 2 murals. Why did he build a chariot? Although in the first painting, Golden King focused the composition on how to express his wisdom and martial prowess, the posture of wielding the forging hammer, the focused and detached demeanor, under the exquisite painting, was lifelike. However, no matter how wise he was, what he did was only a humble craftsman's work, which was quite inconsistent with his identity. A king should be proud and noble, calmly ordering his servants to do their work. As for personally waving the forging hammer while sweating like rain, it didn't seem to match. What's more, with the strength of Golden King, why would he need a chariot to help him fight? According to legend, the only treasure that was truly worthy of his attention and reliance was his heaven and earth parting sword. The rest of the treasures in the king's treasure house were just collections, which could not help in a real battle. In the second painting, Golden King drove the chariot all the way, and the thorny wheels crushed countless shadow-like enemies, which fully reflected the king's bravery. However, there were many details in the painting that revealed a secret. When the chariot built by Golden King was running, the friction between the outer wall and the clouds produced high-temperature sparks, as if it was desperately resisting the erosion of the clouds. In addition to these 2 paintings, Golden King did not leave any more clues, but when Wang Lu saw this, he had a general judgment. There must be a reason why Golden King built the chariot. Combined with the second painting, the resistance between the chariot and the clouds, it was not difficult to come to a conclusion. Without the chariot, even Golden King would find it difficult to move in the sea of clouds. This difficulty was not due to a lack of power, but due to the laws. It was no wonder that Golden King didn't carve his experience of crossing the sea of clouds into a mural at the entrance of the 4th level for future generations to admire. Because during this process, there were quite a few situations where he was forced into a corner, and it wasn't worth showing off. However, what was it that could make Golden King bow his head? Judging from the situation of this castle, Golden King was just a passerby, so who was the owner of this castle? And the sea of clouds outside the castle, was it naturally formed, or was it caused by external forces? Thinking about it this way, the secret hidden in this chaotic sea of clouds was really amazing. The level involved was likely to go beyond the level of the human world, reaching the realm of the gods. However, now was not the time to decipher the setting of these stories. The immediate problem was how to break through the blockade of clouds and arrive at beautiful unique Pool Peak before Holy Light Religion. In short, if we want to break through the blockade of clouds and mist, we can't rely on personal strength alone. We must rely on the chariot. When Wang Lu thought of this, his eyes began to look around the castle. Inwardly, he gradually felt eager to give it a try. In other words, the resources in the 80 rooms of the castle are the materials for the chariot prepared by some kind person. With so many choices, what kind of chariot should we build? First of all, there must be 5 pairs of wheels, right? TSK, what a bad luck, to actually be assigned to the Blood Demon camp. At the other end of the Sea of Clouds, the group of Holy Light Religion also came to a transit station. It was just that, unlike the serene forest castle where Wang Lu was, they were in a huge tent. Inside the tent, all kinds of materials were piled up like a mountain, mixed together. After seeing this big tent, Paul could not help but complain. Seeing the Supreme Inquisitor's puzzled look, Paul explained to him, in the Sea of Clouds, there are a total of 8 transit stations. They are the resource warehouses built by the 8 powerful people in ancient times in order to break through the blockade of the Sea of Clouds and explore the deeper secrets. The Supreme Inquisitor asked, why do they build the resource warehouses? Because it is necessary to make a suitable means of transportation here to continue to move forward. This Sea of Clouds has a special rule restriction, so it is impossible to move forward on foot. Impossible to move forward on foot? What a strange rule. But, a suitable means of transportation? The Supreme Inquisitor frowned deeper. What is considered suitable? Paul was somewhat embarrassed. About this, Faceless One lightly interjected, if you can reach beautiful unique Pool Peak, then it is suitable. If you can't, then it's not suitable. The rules in the Sea of Clouds are ever-changing. Whether it is suitable or not, you can only know by walking through it yourself. The reason why this storehouse has collected so many resources is to give people countless chances to try again and again. The Supreme Inquisitor was silent for a moment. Then he went straight to the exit of the big tent and stepped into the Sea of Clouds. However, he soon fell into a dead end. No matter where he went, he was just walking in the same place. Paul said, don't try. If we could just rush through it, we wouldn't have wasted so many years exploring here. Unfortunately, at that time, we were in the dark crypt, where the resources were 10 times richer than in the Blood Demon tent. Now, it would be difficult to build a level 8 or higher vehicle. Level 8? Paul explained, the vehicles built here, before entering the Sea of Clouds, will get an overall rating according to their quality. Only those with a rating of level 7 or higher can pass through the obstacles and reach the destination, beautiful unique Pool Peak. If the rating is too low, halfway through, it will encounter insurmountable obstacles and disintegrate. After the vehicle disintegrates, what will happen to the people in the vehicle? Faceless One lightly said, rest assured, they will directly return to the starting point. They will not die in the Sea of Clouds. With that, his voice rippled with a hint of sarcasm. However, once you enter the transit station, unless you can reach the beautiful unique Pool Peak, you will never be able to leave. Therefore, being trapped here is no different from being dead. This news was obviously unexpected. The 5 archbishops were slightly shocked. However, the Supreme Inquisitor nodded. Yes, as a faithful servant of the Holy Light, the one who bathes in the Holy Light is my gift. Those who can't complete the task are not qualified to live in this world. Then the Supreme Inquisitor asked Paul, you have passed the 4th pass, so it shouldn't be difficult to build a vehicle that can pass this pass, right? Paul said, naturally, it's not difficult. In the last pass, we were lucky enough to imitate the famous glorious extreme speed in the history of the Church. With a rating of level 8, we cut through all the obstacles to reach the destination. Glorious extreme speed. The Supreme Inquisitor sucked in a mouthful of cold air. That is the rumored vehicle of the Holy Light's child in the ancient times, the legendary vehicle that has been destroyed for thousands of years. At present, the only remaining wreckage is preserved in the Cathedral of Origin. Even the most brilliant craftsman is unable to decipher its secret, yet you guys actually imitated it? Paul somewhat awkwardly said, "Of course it's not me." The Supreme Inquisitor froze for a moment. He also realized that expecting Paul, this waste, to imitate glorious extreme speed was like a fantasy. Then, "Faceless, is that you? Can you build another chariot?" Faceless One sneered. "Of course not. The resources in the Blood Demon tent are completely different from the Dark Crypt. The several key materials needed for glorious extreme speed are not here, so how could I make it? Moreover, when I built glorious extreme speed, the materials in the Dark Crypt have already been used up, so it's impossible to build a second vehicle." Upon hearing this, Paul was taken aback. What? Impossible to build a second vehicle? The Supreme Inquisitor was not surprised by this. Then, in addition to glorious extreme speed, can you build another level 8 vehicle? Faceless One said, "Is there any other vehicle in the history of Holy Light religion that can be on the same level as glorious extreme speed?" The Supreme Inquisitor was speechless. In the history of Holy Light religion, there were countless sacred tools, but there was only one vehicle, glorious extreme speed. The quality of other vehicles was much inferior. So what are you going to do? It's very simple. If we can't build it, then we won't build it. Faceless One said, "Why do we have to build a level 7 or 8 vehicle? In fact, even if we are assigned to the Dark Crypt, with complete resources and complete blueprints, we don't need to waste time to modify the blueprints through trial and error. However, if we really want to build a legendary vehicle, it's impossible without a few months of time. But a few months is too long for us. This is a race game, so we don't have a few months to waste." Then, Faceless One said, "Since it's a race game, there are 2 ways to win. The first is to be faster than the other party, and the second is to make the other party slower than you. The topography of the Sea of Clouds is generally like a ring of ripples. The closer you are to the core of beautiful unique Pool Peak, the stronger the resistance. Conversely, the closer you are to the periphery, the easier it is to advance. The 8 transit stations on the periphery of the Sea of Clouds are all on the same periphery ring. Therefore, we only need to use the shortest time to build a vehicle that can barely break through the cloud blockade and can move freely on the periphery, probably a level 1 or 2 inferior vehicle. And then, with the fastest speed to find the opponent and destroy the opponent, so that they can never reach the destination, which is equal to a sure win." The Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand asked, "Will the other party honestly wait in the transit station and let you find them?" Faceless One said, "As long as we move fast enough, they won't have enough time to leave. They don't have the experience of passing through the checkpoint. In theory, it would take a certain amount of time to solve the puzzle of needing a vehicle to move forward. As for building a vehicle, it would take even more time. Moreover, even if they can really build a vehicle in just a few days and leave the transit station, I have a way to lock their position in the Sea of Clouds." Ferdinand curiously said, "This Sea of Clouds is isolated from all perception. How are you going to lock them?" Faceless One coldly smiled. "Because the holy light will guide me forward." Chapter 340. To sum up, what we have to do now is to build a chariot. After reading the clues left by Golden King, Wang Lu quickly gathered his teammates and shared his judgment. No one would doubt Wang Lu's judgment. Since he dared to assert that the chariot was the key to break through the cloud blockade, then it should not be wrong. And when Aya and the others saw the mural above the gate, they even more agreed with Wang Lu's conclusion. "But, can you build a chariot?" Aya asked. "As far as I know, although you've learned a lot in Spirit Sword Mountain, you haven't had the time to dabble in the chariot refining." Wang Lu said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to know my progress so well." "You're right, although I've begun to learn the path of tool refining, I haven't even had the time to start on the chariot manufacturing, which is a high-order branch subject. Therefore, it's impossible to build a luxury car like Golden King." After a pause, Wang Lu said, "However, I can still build a simple chariot." "Simple?" According to the description of Golden King's mural, there are dangers everywhere in the sea of clouds, and the chariot can be said to be our only shelter. Wouldn't it be too dangerous to build a simple chariot? Aya said, it's better to be safe. Although I haven't systematically studied the manufacturing of a chariot, I've been on the battlefield for a long time, so I have some understanding of it. If the two of us cooperate, we can try to build a powerful chariot. In any case, the resources in this castle are almost infinite, so we can try as much as we want. With your talent, even if you start from scratch, it's still not too late. Wang Lu shook his head and said with a smile, Aya, you think too highly of me. The chariot is broad and profound. In the absence of guidance, if we rely on self-study and exploration, it would take at least 3 to 5 years to build a chariot with 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels. But how can we have 3 to 5 years? With that, Wang Lu's expression gradually became serious. In fact, we probably don't even have 3 to 5 days. This is a race game, and there are 2 conditions for winning. One is to try to be faster than the other, and the other is to try to make the other party slower than you. With our conditions, there is only the first way to go, but for Holy Light religion, they are likely to choose the second way. As long as they use the fastest speed to build a simple chariot to break into the sea of clouds and try to eliminate us, it will be a great success. There is no need to waste time competing with the sea of clouds. Aya was startled when she heard this, but her eyes immediately calmed down. I didn't think of this, but if we don't even have 3 to 5 days, what should we do? It's very simple. We have to be faster than them. If they take 3 to 5 days to build a simple war chariot, we will take 6 to 10 hours. 6 to 10 hours. Aya was surprised. Not to mention building a war chariot, even drawing a war chariot would be difficult. Wang Lu said confidently, don't worry, I have a special manufacturing technique. Didn't I say that I can't make complicated ones, but I can make simple ones? Leave the rest to me. Simple. An ominous premonition rose in Aya's heart. Simple war chariot, how simple was it? However, no matter how arrogant Wang Lu was, he wouldn't treat everyone's lives as a joke. Right now, they could only trust him. Half an hour later, Wang Lu successfully built his first war chariot. Ha ha ha, my number 1 war chariot is fresh out of the oven. When Wang Lu came out of a room that stored a large amount of metal, his hearty laughter filled every corner of the hall. Aya and the others who stayed behind in the hall were surprised. So fast. Although they already knew that Wang Lu was a person who was good at creating miracles, this time, he still stunned them. In just half an hour, he built a war chariot, which was somewhat beyond their imagination. Senior brother is so awesome. Luli clapped her hands in excitement as if she had created a miracle. Where is the war chariot? Luli wants to see it. Wang Lu waved his hand sideways, revealing something behind him, and then said with a hearty smile, look, it's here. Luli's eyes widened. After looking at it again and again, she inconceivably pointed at the thing behind Wang Lu and tremblingly asked, don't tell me, that's Senior brother's war chariot? Wang Lu nodded. Yes, this is the everlasting war chariot that I personally forged and decorated after gathering a large amount of gold and mithril. Doesn't it look very mighty and majestic that you can't look straight at it? Can't look straight at it, is it? It's indeed hard to look straight at it. Aya swallowed with difficulty. Her eyes were also wide open, revealing a look of disbelief. Is that a war chariot? How could there be such a war chariot in this world? It only has 2 wheels. Wang Lu smiled and reached out to stroke his beloved war chariot. After all, it's a simple version. Compared to the big guy with 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels, it's certainly a lot simpler, so it's normal to have fewer wheels. Moreover, are 2-wheeled war chariots rare? Many armies use 2-wheeled war chariots to fight. Aya anxiously said, that's because there's a mount pulling the chariot. Moreover, the 2 wheels of the 2-wheeled war chariot are coaxial. Your 2 wheels, one in front and one in the back, are connected by by a chain. Moreover, looking at the structure, it's clearly human-powered. Wang Lu proudly smiled. Yes, it doesn't need animal power. As long as the pedals are pushed, the chain can drive the wheels to roll forward. It's very convenient and fast. Therefore, this war chariot has another name, bicycle. Are you going to break through the sea of clouds with this meat-wrapped iron thing? Are you crazy? Wang Lu's smile gradually faded. I'm crazy? It's just that your mind can't keep up. The rules here limit that we must take a war chariot to leave the castle and enter the sea of clouds, but there's no rule on what kind of war chariot it is, right? But you're too far-fetched. Such a simple war chariot, what if we encounter danger? Wang Lu picked up his smile again. Encounter danger? Have you forgotten my profession? I'm the strongest meat shield. Compared to meat wrapped in iron is stronger. Aya felt that no matter how reasonable she was when talking to Wang Lu, she would be at a loss for words after 2 or 3 sentences, so she couldn't say much. She changed the topic and asked, but your war chariot only has 1 seat, and we have 5 people here. Wang Lu said, what's so difficult about that? Just stack it up. Stack it up. That's right, later I'll be in charge of driving the war chariot. You'll ride on my neck, then spread your arms and let Lioli and Little White sit on either side. The stupid dog will sit in the basket in front of me. Isn't that enough? Aya imagined the scene in her mind and wanted to vomit blood. Don't even think about making me perform that kind of ugly performance. How is that ugly performance? That's the world's number 3 acrobatic performance. Wang Lu said, but he also knew that it was difficult for Aya to accept the world's number 3 acrobatic performance, so he didn't force her. He pushed the everlasting war chariot and walked out alone. Of course, since this war chariot hasn't been tested in actual combat, I won't force you to fight with me. I'll go out alone to test the performance of the war chariot. At the same time, I'll try to verify my conjecture. Seeing that Wang Lu had made up his mind, although Aya was quite against it in her heart, she didn't say anything. She just silently stood by the door, deciding that if Wang Lu encountered any danger, she would go to his rescue at the first moment. The door to the castle's exit was slowly pushed open, revealing the endless confusion behind the door. Wang Lu elegantly boarded the war chariot and quickly drove behind the door. Aya guarded by the door, her whole body on guard. However, just as Wang Lu's figure disappeared into the sea of clouds, Aya completely lost contact with him. What? Aya was startled. She immediately guessed that there was a special law in the sea of clouds that isolated perception. Wang Lu shouldn't have gone far, but the woman couldn't help but worry. This place was filled with strange rules. When a person was alone, they couldn't leave the castle, but as long as they rode the strange war chariot, they would be unimpeded. The person who built this ancient castle back then must have had a really wicked sense of humor. There shouldn't be any problems for Wang Lu to explore it. It really is a strange place. On the other side, riding his beloved everlasting war chariot, Wang Lu was slowly advancing through the sea of clouds. Although looking out from the castle, the clouds and mist obscured one's vision. However, once one entered the clouds and mist, one would discover that there was actually a different world. The thick clouds and mist were actually just a layer of veil that obstructed one's vision. Once one broke through it, the view behind would suddenly become clear. Wang Lu was traveling through a wide canyon. On both sides were picturesque mountains and rivers, with birds chirping and fragrant flowers. It was a beautiful scenery. The sun hung high above his head, and there weren't any clouds for thousands of miles. Let alone a churning sea of clouds, there wasn't even a single cloud. However, not long after riding along the canyon, the air suddenly became heavy and stagnant, making it difficult to breathe. The binding force from the earth suddenly increased several times, firmly attracting Wang Lu and his war chariot. The wheels made of cork sank deeper into the ground. Wang Lu hesitated for a moment and then decided to continue to move forward. However, as he continued to go deeper, the resistance rapidly increased. Before long, the restraint from the earth had been 100 times stronger than before. It was tantamount to Wang Lu carrying 100 everlasting self-propelled vehicles and 100 strong young men. This was naturally not a burden for Wang Lu, whose physique had already surpassed that of a king pill cultivator. But, for the war chariot beneath him, it was unbearable. With a creaking sound, the wheels of the everlasting war chariot collapsed. At the same time, Wang Lu felt his vision blur, and he reappeared in the gloomy castle. Aya and the others asked with concern, "Senior brother Wang Lu, are you okay?" Wang Lu nodded, signaling everyone to be at ease. He then looked down at the wreckage of the everlasting war chariot that had been distorted by the great gravity, and said with regret, "The everlasting is broken. However, this exploration has accumulated valuable experience, and the sacrifice of the everlasting is valuable. The next step is gradually becoming clear." As Wang Lu spoke, he resolutely walked into the room where the resources were stored and began a new round of forging. Chapter 341. This is your second vehicle, the flying pigeon? Looking at Wang Lu's freshly made second vehicle, Aya felt weak all over. She then made up her mind not to ride it no matter what. According to Wang Lu, the second vehicle was a modified version based on the lessons he learned from the failure of the first vehicle. All aspects of performance had a qualitative leap, and its ability to survive in the sea of clouds was significantly enhanced. However, in Aya's eyes, it was a broken goods with a crooked beam, 2 wheels that were not perfectly round, and the chain was loose. Rather than saying it was a pigeon, it was more like a weak chicken. Roughly speaking, it was just such a vehicle. What happened to you just now?" Aya could not help but sincerely ask with emotion. Wang Lu sighed. The pain of a genius often comes from the prejudice of the secular world. "Aya, I have eaten your soft rice for so many years in the Spirit Sword Mountain cafeteria. I always thought that a person who can make dark cuisine must have the temperament of a performance artist. Unexpectedly, you're also so vulgar." Then, before Aya's anger accumulated to a certain level, Wang Lu explained, "Don't look at this vehicle's ugly appearance. I have a special driving skill." Aya suspiciously asked, "Special driving skill?" Wang Lu nodded, and then took out a tough rope and tied it to the beam of the vehicle. Because it was crooked, the rope just happened to be stuck in a groove, which was particularly strong. Then, Wang Lu exerted force with both of his hands, lifted the entire vehicle and put it on his back. The 2 ends of the rope went around his chest and tied a knot. He actually carried the vehicle on his back like a huge sword. "Humph, this way, I don't have to worry about the vehicle collapsing under the 100 times gravity." Aya was dumbfounded. She felt that the bottom line of her imagination had once again been broken. She had been leading the army for many years and had seen all kinds of special driving skills. However, she had never seen anyone driving a vehicle on his back. "What kind of vehicle is this?" "It's more like a piece of luggage." Wang Lu shook his head. "This is the prejudice of the secular world. This is just a special driving method, called the old man pulling the vehicle. Go ahead, I don't care about you anymore." Wang Lu then carried his beloved flying pigeon vehicle and once again went deep into the sea of clouds. And this time, his purpose was very clear: go as deep as possible, break through, and see where the limit of his routine was. Wang Lu didn't think that the old man pulling the carriage could protect him all the way to beautiful unique Pool Peak. However, as a professional adventurer, his strong intuition told him that it was best not to stick to the castle, because that would be suicidal. Therefore, he would rather take the risk of traveling alone through the sea of clouds to find a shortcut. In fact, there was indeed a vague idea in his mind. To put it bluntly, it was a very simple and straightforward idea, but it was a thought that many people ignored. A long, long time ago, the ancient powers left behind a gloomy ancient castle at the edge of the Cloud Sea. It was used as a platform and warehouse to build war chariots. Although it was not clear why they were so obsessed with war chariots, in short, after they ended their exploration of the Cloud Sea, did they leave anything here? Similarly, tens of thousands of years ago, Golden King built a powerful chariot in the castle and crushed all the way to beautiful unique Pool Peak. Then, what happened to that chariot? Was it taken away by him as a souvenir, or? There was no definite answer to these questions, but it didn't prevent Wang Lu from guessing. After all, there was not much loss. According to Wang Lu's guess, the Holy Light religion should not be as straightforward as him. At least, it would take them a few days to build a low-level vehicle, and then they would break through the obstacles and find trouble with him. And these few days were the last buffer for him. He must find a shortcut during this period. Otherwise, if he was caught by the other party, he would basically die. Although in the Sea of Clouds, for some reason, there was a limit on the strength of the profession, but the upper limit was set at the intermediate high-order profession, similar to the Yuanying stage cultivators in 9 regions. Wang Lu asked himself that with his current strength, he might be able to fight against a Yuanying stage cultivator, but he could only fight for 2 or 3 rounds. Moreover, it couldn't be a peak Yuanying stage or an abnormal Yuanying stage cultivator. At most, it should be similar to Tiger King of the Beast Master School. There must be no additional value on the baseline. If it were those old guys of Heavenly Sword Hall, no matter how confident Wang Lu was, he didn't think that he could keep pace with them after 10 years of cultivation. And this time, the opponent was a Holy One, a legendary level Holy One. The legendary level of the Western continent could barely be equated to the Unity stage cultivators of 9 regions. Of course, this equivalence was very difficult to draw, because the value of the current legendary level of the Western continent was far less than that of the past. Aya, at her peak, had not completely crossed the threshold of the legendary level. However, in her opinion, apart from the Pope, she dared to fight any of the so-called legendary level of the Holy Light religion. If it was the legendary level of the treasure house manager, she could even fight 5 of them. However, that was only for Aya. For a young cultivator who had only been cultivating for more than 10 years, a legendary level was still a legendary level, an insurmountable mountain. Even if the other side suppressed their strength to the same level as him, they could still crush him by virtue of their experience and skill, not to mention how far away was the intermediate level of high order. In short, this time, he tied the flying pigeon to his back and walked on foot, which had completely deviated from the original intention of this Sea of Clouds war lane. Moreover, he knew that he could not go any deeper into the Sea of Clouds. However, it saved him precious time. During this time, he must find a vehicle that could be recycled as soon as possible. Wang Lu knew that his idea was somewhat whimsical. However, he still remembered that when the Everlasting collapsed and he was forcibly sent back to the starting point, he seemed to have vaguely discovered something. As he walked on the old road again, Wang Lu soon felt the pressure of the 100-fold gravity again. However, this time, he was carrying the vehicle on his back, so he didn't have to bear the heavy pressure of the unity of man and vehicle. Thus, he was still able to persist. As Wang Lu continued to go deeper into the canyon, the pressure of the gravity became stronger and stronger. Almost every step he took, the pressure doubled. However, as the gravity increased, Wang Lu increasingly felt that the thing he was looking for was getting closer and closer. Finally, he stopped on a barren plain. At this point, the gravity of the Earth has been thousands of times higher than normal. Wang Lu was equivalent to carrying 4 or 5 sets of 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels. Even with his close to Jindan stage physical quality, he began to feel strenuous. Non-phase method was not known for its great power, its pure power was limited. However, it was enough for him to reach this point. The core of gravity was right under his feet. Something was buried here, which formed the strange gravity environment of this valley. The next step was to dig 3 feet into the ground. Needless to say, the ground that could withstand the 1,000-fold gravity was solid. However, Wang Lu used the sword of Mount Kuan as a hoe, digging bit by bit. This upgraded spiritual treasure did not disappoint him. Not only did it have the sharpness to cut iron like mud, but it also had the power to shake the earth. With a swing of the sword, the entire valley would slightly tremble. The only flaw was that the sword spirit Autumn Beam was very dissatisfied with this reckless waste of natural resources. This sword spirit had experienced more than 1,000 years of hardships and had followed more than 10 masters, some strong and some weak, but none of them treated her lightly, treating the dignified sword of Mount Kuan like a Luoyang shovel. Therefore, during the digging process, Autumn Beam did not say a word. She kept a straight face and even refused to show up. Regarding this behavior of disregarding the master's authority, Wang Lu painstakingly dug while earnestly educating her. Little Yang, although you are the sword spirit of this spiritual treasure, moreover, it has been upgraded on your own, your future prospects are boundless, and your value is extraordinary. But you absolutely cannot look down on simple manual labor because of this. You must know that this kind of labor at the bottom contains the real wisdom. Which of our basic necessities do not require labor? Your high and mighty mentality will definitely limit your development in the future. Of course, I do not blame you. Most of the spirits at your level are proud and arrogant. Unfortunately, because of this, there are only a few that can go one step further and approach immortal treasures. In my opinion, it is necessary for the spirits of high-level magical treasures to go down and receive the education of the people at the bottom. Wang Lu's earnest words did not get any response. Wang Lu called out a few times, but there was no response. He thought that this was not the rhythm of being blacklisted, right? Fortunately, when the digging reached the end, Autumn Beam finally could not help but show up. Because not far from Wang Lu's feet, the majestic energy fluctuations could no longer be concealed. The nearly 10,000-fold gravity made it difficult for Wang Lu to even maintain standing. He had already begun to slowly burn his innate vitality. After Autumn Beam sensed this fluctuation, she finally could not help but be curious. What is this? I also find it strange. Wang Lu reluctantly opened his mouth. I really can't think of anything else on the vehicle that could use such a powerful suction force. Is it a toy designed to relieve the driver's fatigue? This is really a heaven-defying toy. Liang Qiu frowned. Do you think I don't understand, that's why you said it? Wang Lu was surprised. You understand? Autumn Beam coldly said, do you think I'm as simple and easy to fool as Lu Li? Considering Autumn Beam's 1,000 years lifespan, it was unrealistic to expect her to be as pure as a little white flower. Since you are well informed, do you have any opinion on this? Autumn Beam said, I can't say for sure, but this suction force seems to be instinctively calling something. Unfortunately, the thing inside doesn't have the concept of a spirit, otherwise, I might be able to communicate with it and explore it. In this treacherous land of the Sea of Clouds, even if there was a spirit, perhaps it would not be able to hold on for so many years. However, as a sword spirit, Autumn Beam's understanding of things was far better than that of ordinary people. Moreover, she had a steady temperament and did not speak lightly. She judged that this suction force was a call, which was most likely not wrong. A call, could it be? While thinking, Wang Lu asked Autumn Beam to work hard with him to dig the last layer of soil. Although the last layer of soil was not thick, it had been compressed by the 10,000-fold gravity for 10,000 years, so it was simply indestructible. Autumn Beam used the source power of the spiritual treasure to directly shake the ground, which caused the soil to crack, revealing the true appearance below. It was a deep and serene darkness, but upon a closer look, it was actually a ball. Chapter 342. What the hell is this? Wang Lu looked at the black ball under his feet in amazement. However, before he could think about it, the black ball flew up with a particularly fierce momentum. Moreover, it triggered a huge change in the gravitational field, which almost sent Wang Lu flying. Wang Lu only saw a blur, and then the black ball was already suspended high in the air. After a pause, it began to violently tremble, as if it had been imprisoned for many years and had finally broken free. Its interior was filled with a passion that urgently needed to be released. However, after a while, the black ball frantically rotated in the air. Sometimes it crazily rushed in a certain direction, and sometimes it turned back at the same speed, like a wandering beast. At the same time, the gravitational force from the black ball became unstable, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Gradually, Wang Lu found out that the black ball's gravitational force was gradually aimed at a certain direction, as if it wanted to pull something over. However, after tossing around for a long time, in addition to tearing the two sides of the canyon apart and causing landslides, it didn't seem to achieve the desired result. "What is this guy doing?" Wang Lu asked Autumn Beam. "Can you understand it?" Autumn Beam has been staring at the black ball with burning eyes, and after a long time, she sighed with emotion. What a powerful spiritual object. Although its spiritual sense has collapsed, the trace of its existence is deeply engraved in its body. The spirit still retains its obsession from when it was alive. Wang Lu tried to understand it. In other words, what we are seeing now is a kind of corpse coming back to life. If you must say so, yes. Autumn Beam tried to further explain to Wang Lu, this black ball should be an astonishing energy core, which can be used in puppets, cloud wave boats, and other things, which can continuously provide energy. Its grade is very high. According to the standard of 9 regions, it should be close to the level of immortal treasure. In addition to providing energy, it can also become the central core of a huge object, responsible for assisting or replacing the user to better play the function of the object. For example, the modified version of the 10,000 Art-Sex Cloud Wave boat normally needs hundreds of shoot-on stage cultivators to drive it. However, because there is a spiritual treasure-level central core inside the Cloud Wave boat, it only needs 1 or 2 people to start it. I see. Speaking of this, Wang Lu could understand. It seems that a long time ago, this thing's main body was severely injured and became fragmented. The fragments were scattered in various places, and it was unfortunately buried in a valley. When its spiritual sense was seriously injured and on the verge of collapse, its remaining thought was to use a strong gravitational force to gather its fragmented body together to recover from its injuries. Unfortunately, as the core, the black sphere was buried underground. The stronger the gravity, the tighter it was trapped by the soil and rocks. It was not until many years later that I was lucky enough to dig it out and see the light of day again. As Wang Lu spoke, he looked at the black ball in the sky that seemed to have gone mad and could not help but smile. Next, let's see if it's worthy of this once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity. While speaking, the black ball finally seemed to have caught something. Its main body shook and then began to violently shake. The black ball stirred up the air, causing a terrible muffled sound in the valley. From an unknown distance away, the sound of mountains collapsing and the earth collapsing could be heard. A moment later, a golden component that looked like a giant bell flew over from afar with dust all over its body. When it got close, it was pulled by the black ball and was directly enveloped by it. Although the black ball was covered with a thick bell-like cover, the gravitational force actually became stronger. From the opening of the bell cover, an incomparably strong gravitational force was released, which caused the entire valley to fall into distortion. Wang Lu's footing was unstable. He hastily operated his non-phase method to isolate the gravitational force outside, and then barely managed to stand up. And this was just the aftermath of the gravitational force. The direction of the gravitational force released by the black ball was obliquely upward, pointing toward the sky. Not long after, an oval-shaped disc flew down from the clouds in the sky and rotated under the bell cover, also hovering in midair. After that, one by one, the components were attracted by the gravitational force of the black ball and gathered together. The surface of these components were covered with the traces left behind by the years. Some of them even only had a small part of them left. However, when they gathered together and began to move slowly around the black ball and the bell cover, the scars left by the years faded away and gradually restored their original appearance. This was a self-repairing tank. Although, from the shape alone, it was not the same as a tank. There were neither thick wheels nor sharp horns. At first glance, it looked like a tower. The largest oval chassis, with a slightly convex cushion at the bottom, slowly rotated horizontally. Above the chassis, the black ball hidden in the bell cover was at the core, surrounded by a thick shield, which gradually shrank from the bottom to the top, and finally became a pointed cone. On the surface of this pagoda, there was an opening for people to enter and exit. The internal space, even without considering space expansion spells and other factors, could accommodate 4 or 5 people. At the same time, the smooth lines, the dazzling appearance, and especially the brilliant golden light, were enough for Wang Lu to judge its identity. It must be Golden King. This kind of blinding coloring method, if it's not Golden King, I will eat it whole. Wang Lu looked at the golden tank, which was quietly floating in the air after it was restored, and could not help but laugh. Although it was completely different from the traditional tank shape on the mural, Wang Lu did not intend to pay too much attention to the details. No matter how strange this floating tank looked, it was much better than Flying Pigeon and Everlasting. There was no doubt that this was a high-grade tank. If it was a low-grade tank, perhaps Golden King would disdain to build it. And only Golden King would be so extravagant as to leave such a good thing in the sea of clouds. Other people, such as the ancient Almighty who built the transit station, would leave mountains of resources and materials on the periphery of the sea of clouds, but it was impossible for them to abandon the complete cost. This time, when Wang Lu rode the tank out to scavenge, at first, he did not dare to expect to pick up a complete tank. He hoped to assemble some broken parts and piece together a barely usable guy, which could last for a while. Unexpectedly, his luck was good enough to follow in the footsteps of Golden King. Thinking about it, the pleasure of being friends with a local tyrant was probably similar to this. Whatever the other party casually eliminated was enough to make a new one on his side. Of course, to enjoy the legacy of the predecessors, it was inevitable that he would be suspected of being the successor. But from another point of view, if you were poisoned by the strange aphrodisiac powder and were about to die from the poison, and at the same time, you had to take care of the elderly and children, and there were thousands of brothers behind you who needed to be led by you. Let alone taking over, even if you wanted to deliver a baby, you might not be able to do it. Next, it depends on whether this new tank is willing to accept a new master. With that, Wang Lu rode the gust of wind and flew into the air, trying to approach the tank and put his hand on the golden surface of the tank. Many spiritual treasures with a spirit would only follow one master for life, either because of the restriction placed by the master, or because of the loyalty of the spirit itself. However, this chariot of Golden King seemed to have no limit. When Wang Lu pressed his hand on the armor of the chariot and released his primordial spirit into the chariot, the entire chariot trembled. A stream of water-like energy gushed out from the core, flowed around his body, and touched Wang Lu's primordial spirit. Buzz. Wang Lu's primordial spirit felt a strong shock, as if it wanted to bombard him to death. He immediately operated his non-phase method to protect his primordial spirit. However, under the impact, his defensive circle was somewhat shaky. Previously, in order to dig this black ball, he had to endure the 10,000 times heavy pressure, and his non-phase method had already been overloaded. At this time, the primordial spirit's impact happened in a hurry, and the flow of his magical power was not smooth. Thus, his defensive circle was actually not able to hold up. However, primordial spirit was a cultivator's most vital thing. In order to ensure that the defensive strength was not reduced, he could only increase the output, and even if he had to use twice the effort for half the result, he had to resist it. Wang Lu suddenly felt a burst of emptiness in his jade mansion, as if he had been squeezed dozens of times in one night, which made him feel unspeakably uncomfortable. However, under this emptiness contraction, a flash of inspiration came to him. Why was there a need to repel all the impacts? Primordial spirit was indeed a vital thing. Moreover, because his cultivation level was not high enough, his primordial spirit was fragile and could not withstand the devastation. However, his body and jade mansion were like a wilderness. If he could guide the impact to his jade mansion and his body to bear the impact and evenly distribute it, even if he had to suffer some injuries, he could still keep his defense from being broken, and his vital points would not be lost. And as a cultivator with void spirit root, the path inside his body was quite smooth. Thus, it did not take him much effort to guide the impact on his primordial spirit to his body. This method, in simple terms, was selling his blood. Relying on his youthful vigor, his abundant innate vitality, and his non-phase method, which was the best method to heal injuries, he could safely bear the injury. It was just right for the critical moment when his magical power was running out. With that thought in mind, Wang Lu immediately changed his strategy. He changed his defensive method from firm isolation to channeling, guiding the impact of the chariot to his body and jade mansion. Suddenly, the 206 non-phase sword bones groaned in unison, and numerous cracks appeared in his jade mansion. However, no matter how fierce the impact of the chariot was, it could not shake his primordial spirit. Of course, selling his blood was not a long-term solution, but it was enough for him to persist through the current difficulty. This was not a life-and-death struggle, but a slightly harsh test. After the impact of the chariot continued for a period of time, it began to gradually ease. After a while, the force that gushed out from the black ball suddenly became gentle and soft, without any hostility. Is this subdued? The turbulence just now was a necessary test for the new owner of the chariot. If the owner could not withstand it, then naturally, he would not have the qualification to be the owner. The grade of this chariot was quite high. Generally, even high-order professions would find it difficult to withstand it. Moreover, the sea of clouds restricted the power level, which was enough to shield most of the participants from the trial. Unfortunately, this chariot encountered Wang Lu, who had yet to condense the king pill. In the Western continent, he was not even a high-order professions, but his endurance was far above that of a common high-order cultivator of 9 regions. The chariot slightly trembled, as if in response to Wang Lu's question. The tool spirit of this chariot had disappeared, so it did not have any spiritual sense or command. Moreover, it was separated and disintegrated, buried in the soil for more than 10,000 years. However, at this time, it still appeared to be full of spiritual energy. It was indeed a rare good chariot. Considering that you have a master, and I'm just a successor, why don't I call you Pan? The chariot slightly trembled, obviously dissatisfied. Or Goldenwood Ear? The chariot violently trembled. TSK, seeing that you look like a lightning tower, I might as well call you Tada. This time, the chariot did not object. Obviously, it had a special liking for repetitive words. Chapter 343. When Wang Lu drove the Tada chariot back to the castle in a flying saucer-like manner, the amazement of Aya and the others was self-evident. From the time when Wang Lu set off with the chariot to the time when he drove the flying saucer back, half a day had passed. Although it was not a long time, it made people uneasy. Aya silently waited at the castle gate for Wang Lu's return, but she didn't expect him to come back with a big guy. Where did this come from? Aya's eyes were full of amazement. Her clear eyes were firmly fixed on the flying saucer-like chariot, unable to leave no matter what. A strand of hair that suddenly stood up on top of her head fully showed the excitement in her heart, as well as her love for this chariot. Although the shape was unique, Tada was undoubtedly a very good chariot, and obviously, Aya had no resistance to a good chariot. Wang Lu jumped down from the Tada chariot, still carrying the flying pigeon chariot that he personally built. Seeing Aya's almost shining eyes, he recalled her previous dislike of the flying pigeon and could not help but helplessly smile. You're the type who would rather cry in the chariot than laugh on the flying pigeon. In addition to Aya, Luli was also very fond of Tada. She flew around the steeple-like chariot, and from time to time, she cautiously tapped the body of the chariot with her fingertips, and from time to time, she smiled foolishly at the smooth mirror-like outer wall of the chariot. As for Bai Shixian and Quan Zouhua, they were also surprised by the uniqueness of this chariot, and their attention was drawn to it. After a while, when everyone had seen enough, Wang Lu clapped his hands. Okay, the problem of the chariot has been solved. Let's get on the chariot and set off. Don't waste the time that I've gained by sacrificing the everlasting. Upon hearing this, Aya's expression turned solemn. She remembered that their situation was not good, far from being able to enjoy the chariot with peace of mind. The threat of holy light religion could come at any time, and at that time, she was far from having the capital to contend against them. This unique chariot was the key to the victory of the weak against the strong. And to be able to obtain this war chariot, Wang Lu undoubtedly contributed a lot. Thinking of this, Aya's heart was slightly moved. She suddenly had an absurd thought. Perhaps for Wang Lu, there was nothing in this world that he couldn't do. Perhaps he really was invincible. However, before Aya could carefully experience the changes in her heart, Wang Lu had already called for everyone to board the war chariot and fly towards the boundless sea of clouds outside the castle. The gate of the castle slowly opened and closed. Before going out, Aya felt something and looked up. At the top of the two gates, the murals left by Golden King were shining, as if laughing at the insignificance of the people below. At the same time, in another place on the periphery of the Sea of Clouds, in the Blood Demon tent, the preparation of holy light religion had also reached the final stage. Very good, very good. In less than a day, the war chariot is almost complete, and its grade is still within the initial expectations. You guys, when we get back, I'll give you a great merit. Paul paced back and forth in the big tent, overflowing with excitement. The progress of building the war chariot was faster than expected, because one of the 5 archbishops sent by the Pope happened to be good at building war chariot. With the materials in the big tent, he and the others worked together to build a level 3 or 4 war chariot in just half a day. Holy Pure. Holy Pure war chariot was not a powerful war chariot. In a large-scale battlefield, its auxiliary role was limited. However, its advantage was that it was fast and stealthy enough, which was suitable for the current task. The purpose of holy light religion was very clear. Instead of honestly competing according to the rules, hoping to arrive at beautiful unique pool peak faster than Wang Lu, it was better to simply cut the weeds and eliminate the roots of the opponent. This was the solution to the root of the problem. Although this method was not his own idea, Paul deeply agreed with it. Especially when the progress of the war chariot was faster than expected, he was filled with joy. At this time, those heretics probably haven't even solved the riddle of entering the Sea of Clouds, right? When we get there in time to block them, I really look forward to their desperate eyes. Paul fiercely said, as if he had already seen the heretics being torn to pieces in front of him, and the Sea of Holy Light giving him a greater gift because he had purified the heretics. Before long, the finishing work of the Holy Pure war chariot was declared to be completed. Paul waved his hand. Everyone, get on the chariot and get ready to go. Unfortunately, no one paid attention to him. Everyone looked at Faceless One. Even Ferdinand was silently waiting for Faceless One's instruction. Paul gawked, and then his face turned red, feeling that he had suffered a great humiliation. Yes, in terms of strength and talent, I'm not that good, but don't forget, I'm the administrator of the king's treasure house. Without me, what can you do even if you have the ability? Let alone if you really have that great ability, why would you let me be the administrator? You can do it yourself. Faceless One didn't even look at the gloomy Paul. He went straight to the Holy Pure war chariot, sat on the main seat, and then coldly snorted. Do you want me to invite you? Quickly get on the chariot. Before long, the fully covered Holy Pure war chariot has been completely submerged in the Sea of Clouds. The Holy Light Religion people were all crowded in the not spacious chariot, each taking their place. Some were responsible for concealing the chariot's track, some were responsible for providing power, and some were responsible for driving the direction. The division of labor was very clear. The grade of the Holy Pure war chariot was not high, so if they wanted to travel freely in the Sea of Clouds, they had to rely on human assistance. On the chariot, there were 2 holy ones and 5 archbishops, a luxurious lineup that was jaw-dropping. Because of this, the performance of the Holy Pure war chariot was far above the normal level. However, after all, its natural level was not high enough, so the performance of the Holy Pure war chariot was still not satisfactory. Is there no way to go faster? Ferdinand asked in a sinking voice. It's not even as fast as us flying alone. I think it's better to let me. Faceless One turned his head, looked at him with his pale face, and then coldly interrupted. Idiot, do you want to get off the chariot? Think about it with your poor brain. If we can freely walk in this sea of clouds, why would we need to have a chariot to enter? Do you think this is a rule that someone has nothing better to do and randomly designed? Ferdinand was silent. Before this, he had never even heard of this sea of clouds, so naturally, he couldn't say anything about the rules of this sea of clouds. Since Faceless One opposed it, he no longer insisted. Although Faceless One's arrogant and rude face was unbearable, Ferdinand at least understood the priorities. Right now, the most important thing was to work together to eliminate the hidden danger of the church, rather than personal grudges. Of course, when this matter was over, he and Faceless One would carefully calculate every account. However, just as Ferdinand secretly made up his mind, Faceless One suddenly laughed wildly. That voice seemed to be muffled in a cloth, making people's hair stand on end. Ha ha ha, well done, heretic. I'm really looking forward to your purification ceremony. The Chief Inquisitor's heart was slightly uneasy. What's wrong? Faceless One didn't hide it and bluntly said, that group of heretics has left the transit station and is moving fast toward the Sea of Clouds. What? The people on the Holy Pure War Chariot were all stunned. They have left the transit station? Are you sure? Ferdinand sternly asked. You're the one who said that it would take them a long time to solve the puzzle, and it would take them several days to build the chariot. We can definitely make it in time, right? What's going on now? Yes, if it's them, it would take them more than a day to solve the puzzle, and building the chariot would take a long time. Even if some of them are good at chariot building, it's impossible for them to do it better than us. But what if it's not just them? Faceless One lightly said, as if he was not explaining for anyone, but rather talking to himself, a certain haunting lunatic is actually willing to put down his status? Hearing the words haunting him, Paul's whole body quivered. Who are you talking about? Ferdinand asked, since you can sense their location, then do you know what grade the chariot they are riding on is? Level 8 or above. Level 8? Isn't that the same level as brilliant extreme speed? The Chief Inquisitor was extremely shocked. How did they do it? In less than a day, they built a level 8 chariot? Is this something that can be achieved by human beings? Of course not. Starting from scratch, even a Holy One can't build a level 8 chariot in a day. Faceless One somewhat absent-mindedly said, but they didn't start from scratch, they inherited someone's legacy. Humph, what's the point of you idiots trying to get to the bottom of it? If it's a level 8 chariot, relying on our Holy Pure War Chariot, how could we possibly catch up? We can't catch up with the chariot, but can't we catch up with them? Faceless One said, slightly tilted his head to another direction, and then sneered. It's almost time to stop. Very good, keep this momentum and reach beautiful unique Pool Peak as fast as possible. As long as we get to the mountain, the other party's means will be useless. After setting off from the castle, Wang Lu immediately drove the chariot into the Sea of Clouds at the fastest speed. And this tower-shaped chariot also lived up to his expectations. After a period of acceleration, it resolutely changed its shape. The sharp top of the tower was suddenly flattened, and like a sharp lance, it broke through the air. Speed, as fast as lightning, jaw-dropping speed. Once the tower-shaped chariot flattened its body, it became like a lance, and its speed was no less than a swift and fierce flying sword. Wang Lu only saw the Sea of Clouds on both sides crazily retreating as if they were torn apart by a huge force. One scene after another changed around him. Sometimes it was a raging flame, sometimes it was a towering mountain, but all of them were just a flash. Before he could take a second look, they were already left behind by the chariot. The chariot was not only fast, but also very strong. Those flashing scenes were actually tests in the Sea of Clouds. According to the normal procedure, it would take a great deal of effort to pass. However, in front of the Golden King's chariot, the surrounding troubles were not worth mentioning. Very good, things are developing very smoothly. If we continue, it shouldn't be long before we arrive at beautiful unique Pool Peak. Standing in the control position inside the chariot, Wang Lu calmly observed the changes around him. Although the sea of clouds was still a blur, there were many signs that they were quickly approaching the core. But the question is, how long can this go on smoothly? If the people of Holy Light Religion want to make their move, now is the time. Wang Lu muttered to himself, and soon, there were many speculations in his mind. However, in front of the Golden King's chariot, he didn't think the other party could make any effective resistance. Although winning in this way was somewhat unfair, the people of Holy Light Religion were obviously working for Golden King, but they had offended Golden King himself. Therefore, even if they lost, it was not an injustice at all. Everyone, have a good rest. Soon, we can celebrate the victory on beautiful unique Pool Peak. Good. I like celebration banquets the most. Lu Li happily said. Her smile lit up the narrow space inside the chariot. However, at this time, the bright smile on the girl's face suddenly froze. The next moment, a fountain of blood gushed out from her mouth and nose, and the girl's light body slowly fell down like a feather. Chapter 344. Lu Li. Sister Xian, heir. Woof. Lu Li suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood and fainted. In an instant, the car turned into a mess. Bai Shixian picked up Lu Li and, while checking her pulse, tried to summon her magical power, turning it into healing power. However, the magical power of the living dead was like a stone sinking into the sea. Aya took out all of the pills that she obtained from her 100 years of experiential learning across the 2 continents, but she didn't know which one would be effective. Quan Zouhua anxiously scurried around Lu Li. Although its power was formidable, it couldn't be used to save people. In a panic, Wang Lu stared at Lu Li. His fists were clenched, and blood flowed out from his palms. However, he still made a calm judgment. Stop. Stop. Aya was surprised, but then she thought of the problem. Her complexion became incomparably gloomy. Despicable villain, get out here. With that, the Caliban was unsheathed. The golden light was incomparably sharp, as if it was substantial. After being reminded by Wang Lu, Aya also thought that Lu Li was seriously injured at this time, which was undoubtedly the work of Holy Light Religion. Although they didn't care about the specific method, their purpose was obviously not to kill, but to delay their footsteps. Otherwise, since they could inexplicably make Lu Li vomit blood, why couldn't they just let her die? Perhaps, the reason why they didn't directly kill her was because... You're very tactful. Under the alarmed and angry eyes of the crowd, that gentle and indifferent voice came out from Lu Li's mouth. Then, with a strange posture, Lu Li left the embrace of Bai Shixian and quietly stood in front of everyone. It was still the same body, that pure and flawless face, but her expression was stiff like a dead person, as if she was not used to her own face. Faceless. I like to deal with smart people the most. They don't talk much. Faceless One's words were full of sarcasm, but his voice was calm. Unfortunately, you're not the people of my Holy Light Religion. Therefore, even if you're smart, you can only die. Aya tightly gripped the stone sword in her hand as her anger overflowed. Stabbing people in the back, so despicable and shameless, this is indeed the style of Holy Light Religion. Ridiculous. A dignified Night King actually dares to say such ridiculous words. No wonder you're the ruler of a destroyed country, Faceless mocked without any trace of politeness. Sneak attack? Do you have the right to criticize others on this point? The king's treasure house is the territory of Holy Light Religion. Have you obtained anyone's approval to enter the treasure house? You sneaked into someone else's territory, so it's only natural for you to be punished. Aya was startled when she heard this, and then her face sank. Sophistry. Wang Lu reached out his hand to stop Aya, indicating that he would speak. Did they do it on Dragon City's celebration night? Wang Lu asked softly. Was it that drink? Faceless One's stiff face twisted into a smile. How is that possible? Although at that time, we were hostile to each other, Dragon City is, after all, your territory. If I poisoned the drink, it's not a justifiable defense, nor is it a punishment for the traitor. It's purely a sneak attack. I believe in holy light, how could I do such a despicable and shameless thing? Aya angrily said, you dare to say that you didn't do it? Of course I did it, but I didn't poison it. I just chatted with her so that she could face her heart more clearly, that's all. For you heathens, this is simply too gentle and considerate. Face her heart more clearly? Wang Lu sneered. That's all? Faceless One said, of course, the two sides are hostile to each other. As a believer of holy light, how could I take care of the enemy? Therefore, while taking care of her, I also induced the entanglement in the depths of her heart. That's fair. Induced, entanglement? Wang Lu sneered. Fool a fool. How could Luli have such a high IQ to cause her entanglement? Oh. Faceless One was slightly surprised. I thought the two of you are from the same sect, martial brother and sister, so you would be as close as one person. Turns out, even you don't know her. No entanglement? In this world, only a stone will not entangle. As long as it's a human, no matter how simple it is, it will entangle. Because this is what a human is, a flawed mortal that needs the guidance of holy light to continue to move forward. However, on the other hand, it's fortunate that human is full of flaws, so I have a place to use my skills. Holy light religion is full of talented people, so it's not easy to make a name for oneself in the church. With that, Faceless One suddenly tilted his head. By the way, if you're trying to delay the time by chatting, that's exactly what we want. According to the current speed, it won't be long before we meet. By the way, if you're trying to use the life-saving magical treasure left by your sect, you'd better give it up as soon as possible. Even if it's a life-saving magical treasure, if you can't get the consent of the person, it won't work. This, no matter what, it's the same, right? Upon hearing this, Aya was startled. If the person didn't agree, the life-saving magical treasure wouldn't work. She was very clear about this. However, Faceless One said that, could it be, you've occupied Lu Li's spirit? Aya was shocked and angry at the same time. Her hands that held the Caliban sword slightly trembled. As an opponent who has fought against Faceless One, Aya was very clear about his horror. More than 100 years ago, when Faceless One's strength was still very weak, his spirit occupation was a terrifying skill that made people pale in fear. Faceless One was best at playing with people's hearts. He could dig out the softest and darkest part of the human heart, and then use it as nourishment to nourish the darkness. The nourishment process was completely silent, so much so that even the nourishment itself could not detect it. However, once the nourishment was over, a terrible thing would be born. What was born was the Faceless One himself. Once a brave warrior, a strategist, a magician, or a benevolent and virtuous person, once occupied by Faceless One, they would eventually become the new Faceless One. Faceless One didn't have a face because he had seized many people's faces. If he wanted to, he could even change into any face at will. However, once occupied by his spirit, there was no precedent of recovery. Because of this, when Aya learned that Faceless One was still alive, she was always on guard against his spirit occupation. More than 100 years ago, she had a full understanding of spirit occupation. She was also particularly sensitive to the seed he planted in other people's hearts, so it was impossible for her not to discover it. However, more than 100 years later, it seemed like Faceless One's spirit occupation had entered a new realm. Yes, it's spirit occupation. Faceless One casually replied, speaking of which, it's really a very sweet nourishment. Although the realm is not high, the taste is more delicious than that of high-order professions. You. Aya felt her vision go black. Wang Lu still maintained his calm. Spirit occupation? Is it like possession or something like that? That's really troublesome. It seems like I can only send her back to the mountain to be dealt with by the elders. Send her back to the mountain? Faceless One laughed in spite of himself. Hee, in the sea of clouds, even the legendary sages are not free. Do you think a few dead things given by your master can do it? Oh, if the quality is not enough, then the quantity will make up for it. Wang Lu lightly said, took out a stack of talismans from his mustard seed bag, and weighed them in his hand. 1 is not enough, but 10 should be enough. Faceless One's eyes narrowed. This is heavenly talisman? It's actually heavenly talisman? There were millions of talismans in 9 regions, but the prestige of heavenly talisman was known even in the Western continent. It could break the dimension and the plane, and forcibly transport people back to the set location. Although, in this sea of clouds, general space props and spells were basically ineffective, but if it was heavenly talisman, moreover, it was activated at the same time, yes, in terms of power, perhaps it can really break through the blockade of the sea of clouds. However, the premise is that it has to go through Lu Li herself. She agreed. Wang Lu said and then spread out the 10 talismans, and on each of them was written the same name, Lu Li. Obviously, it was already prepared. Moreover, the talismans have been modified by the elders, so whether Lu Li is willing or not, as long as I activate them, she must roll back to the mountain. This is called the authority of the leader. Well then, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you, let's send Lu Li back. With that, Wang Lu poured his magical power into the heavenly talisman, which triggered a dazzling light. Oh, it seems like you're serious? Faceless One finally seemed a bit surprised. But, I have completed the spirit occupation. Using 10 heavenly talismans to send a corpse back, you heathens have committed the felony of extravagance. Corpse? Not necessarily. Wang Lu said, have you really completed the spirit occupation? Although you said it so confidently, I don't believe it. Therefore, I'll just send it back and let the elders help me identify it. If Lu Li is still alive, with the strength of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, how could she be saved? If she's dead, letting the corpse return to its hometown is also humane. The strong confidence in Wang Lu's words also infected Aya. That's right, although there has never been a precedent of surviving the spirit occupation, but if it's Wang Lu, perhaps. Enough. Faceless One coldly said, since you doubt whether my spirit occupation is successful or not, I might as well commit suicide, and you can directly bring the corpse back to your hometown. Wang Lu immediately extinguished the light of the talismans in his hand and then burst into a smile. It seems like it really didn't work. Otherwise, why would you say you want to commit suicide? In that case, I'll put away these 10 fluorescent talismans. Fluorescent talismans? Everyone looked at the talismans in Wang Lu's hand in surprise. Isn't that Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman? Am I sick? Why would I prepare 10 priceless heavenly talismans? However, I have as many fluorescent talismans as I want, so it's more than enough to swindle you. Wang Lu smiled lightly and put the fluorescent talismans back into his mustard seed bag. However, from Aya's point of view, she could see that Wang Lu's hand was actually slightly trembling. Very well, Lu Li is not dead. The protective measures that the elders put on her are really effective. And since she's still alive, everything is possible. Hey, does fraud make you so happy? Faceless One curiously asked and then stretched out his right hand. Right in front of Wang Lu and the others, Lu Li's 5 slender fingers, which were most suitable for holding a sword, were cut off. Chapter 345. Oh, it's quite painful. As the 5 fingers fell to the ground, Faceless One lightly uttered an "oh," and then dropped his arm. Blood gushed out like a fountain from the stump of the fingers. With Lu Li's current physical quality, even if her fingers were really cut off by a sharp weapon, the wound would heal in a short time. This was the comprehensive quality of a successor disciple. People often said that her defense and resilience were slightly weak, but that was only relative to her offensive ability. At present, the 5 fingers were cut off, but the blood continued to flow. Obviously, this was the intentional action of Faceless One, who controlled the body. He deliberately squeezed the blood from Lu Li's body to the wound, allowing it to gush out and cause a lot of blood loss. Hey, I didn't expect your psychological quality to be so good. The other people around you are going crazy, but you, who have the best relationship with Lu Li, are still very calm. Faceless One flaunted the bloody stump of the broken fingers in front of everyone, and then observed the seething anger of Aya and the others while expressing his curiosity about Wang Lu's indifference. What's there to care about? Wang Lu said, it's not like a few broken fingers can't be put back. As for pain or not, in any case, the one who's in pain is you. Faceless One laughed. Although his expression was stiff and distorted, it seemed to be joy from the heart. Well said. But, to be able to remain calm when the people close to you are seriously injured, are you really human? Or do you not care about your junior sister as much as you seem? Wang Lu lightly said, whether I am a human or not, whether I have human feelings or not, whether I care about it or not, my junior sister, after I catch you, I will let you seriously experience it. As for now, tell me your conditions. Conditions? Faceless One asked, do you think I'm here to talk about conditions with you? Wang Lu said, aren't you? Then you're here to chat? Very well, I'll continue to drive. You can accompany me on the road. With that, Wang Lu reached out to the vehicle's control device, ready to start the vehicle to move forward. Faceless One, of course, didn't come to chat. After Wang Lu obtained the inheritance of Golden King and the level 8 vehicle, it was impossible to defeat them in the sea of clouds with normal methods. Therefore, he could only resort to extreme measures, and the hostage in his hands was his greatest trump card. However, when facing an opponent like Wang Lu, the use of the hostage card was also very particular. If one did not play it well, even a good card would be played badly, so have a slow chat. Sure. Faceless One said, by the way, as you guessed, I did not complete the spiritual occupation of Lu Li. However, it's not that I can't occupy her, but I deliberately left a line. But since you don't care about it, it seems like I don't have to hold back, right? Wang Lu's grip on the control stick tightened. What he feared had come true. This was the worst possible situation. A Lu Li who had no value of rescue and a Lu Li who still had a glimmer of hope were completely different concepts. If Lu Li had died, in a sense, it was actually a good thing, because Wang Lu could avenge her at all costs, without any restriction or constraint. But now, I'm not here to talk about conditions with you, because I don't need to talk about my conditions, you already know them. Faceless One lightly said. No need to talk about it, I can't accept it. Wang Lu also coldly responded. Really? Then, let's analyze the situation rationally. Faceless One said, my condition is that you stop here and fight us head-on. Of course, this is a dead end for you. So, I can also put it simply, my condition is to let you die. And then? And then, the bargaining chip in my hand is your most valued junior sister, Lu Li. However, if you die, she will not survive. Moreover, even if I promise to let her live, I'm afraid you won't believe me. Wang Lu sneered. Isn't that clear? Your so-called hostage is meaningless. Faceless One said, it does seem meaningless, but if it's really meaningless, why did you stop the car? Why did you stop until now and not dare to start? Wang Lu's hand that was holding the control stick became even more stiff. Ha ha ha, are you deeply entangled? Faceless One said with a smile, even if you rationally know that this is a dead end, emotionally, you can't just watch your dear junior sister die. Because no matter how many reasons you have, you can't suppress your sense of responsibility and closeness to your junior sister, right? Therefore, even if you are entangled, you know what to do, but you can't do it. Unfortunately, deep spiritual occupation can only be carried out once in a short period of time. Otherwise, right now, you would be a good occupation target. Wang Lu was silent. His eyes gradually moved away from Lu Li. At this time, he heard Aya's voice in his mind. I'm sorry, Wang Lu, it's all because of me that you and Lu Li are involved in this matter. After all, you're not locals, so Holy Light Religion has no reason to kill you. Therefore, I think it's better for me to, for Aya's request. Wang Lu's response was only one sentence, idiot, get lost. Wang Lu. Shut your mouth and obediently watch from the side. If you say one more word, don't blame me for blacklisting you. Aya was stunned for a long time, and finally, she silently cut off the primordial spirit transmission. Actually, she also knew that even if she was willing to sacrifice herself, it might not make the situation better. Not to mention that Wang Lu would never accept her sacrifice. It was just that, if she didn't do it, what else could she do? After a long silence, time passed by bit by bit. Wang Lu's hand was still on the control stick, but he couldn't push it down. Faceless One was interested in watching Wang Lu's reaction, and from time to time, he also used his cold eyes to warn the eager Quan Zouhua and Bai Shixian. Of course, the wound on her palm was not treated, and because of excessive blood loss, Lu Li's body has shown an unnatural paleness. If it were an ordinary person, perhaps she would have already passed out or even died. Even though his spirit occupation was still a little short of completion, he still had the ability to seize Lu Li's life and death. If other people dared to act rashly, they would only end up in a life and death situation. Of course, if they really made their move, it would not be difficult for them to kill Faceless One's avatar. Moreover, after killing it, they could get rid of the burden and go into battle lightly. However, would Wang Lu allow them to make their move? If he wanted to make his move, he would have done it himself, why drag it on? After an unknown amount of time, Aya's battlefield intuition became increasingly aware of the approaching danger. The Holy Light Religion's vehicle was approaching at an alarming speed, and her palms were sweating. Wang Lu finally opened his mouth to break the silence. Just now, you asked me, why did we stop here? Faceless One said, by the way, I also want to ask, you've put your hand on the control stick for so long, but since you don't dare to push it down, why don't you let go? Wang Lu said, because if I let go, I can't see the situation outside. Faceless One suddenly froze, as if he thought of something. What? Bit by bit, Wang Lu's smile returned to his face. The inside of this vehicle is completely enclosed, and the armor is not transparent. Therefore, the reflection of the outside scene from the cabin is actually a transit point. And this transit point is in my hands. Whatever you want to see, you have to get my consent. And from the time I touched the control stick until now, what I showed you is the same scene. Don't you think the clouds outside the vehicle are too monotonous? Faceless One thought for a moment. But the vehicle hasn't started, at least you can't fake this. Yes, you're inside the vehicle, so the internal energy change can't be hidden from you. But why would I need to start the vehicle? The so-called movement is relative. Even if the vehicle doesn't move, if the surrounding scenery is moving, it's the same. The interior of the sea of clouds is unpredictable, so it's not surprising that there are several areas that can move, right? Faceless One was silent. As a veteran of the Sea of Clouds trial, he, of course, knew that it was not surprising. I've been waiting here for so long, and I thought I couldn't wait anymore. But the final result is just passable. Wang Lu said with a smile, finally, I've been waiting for this opportunity. Opportunity. Faceless One softly repeated. At the same time, he was ready to completely annihilate Lu Li's life force at the fastest speed. If Wang Lu wanted to perish indiscriminately, that would indeed be the worst result. However, if he let Lu Li fall, it would cause a serious psychological blow to Wang Lu, which was also a good thing. Spirit occupation could also be used on him. However, the next moment, an unexpected change made Faceless One's reaction slightly slower. Wang Lu pulled the control stick to the side, and the entire chassis of the vehicle and the floor of the cockpit opened up. A strong suction came from below, pulling Wang Lu and Faceless One down at the same time. Aya, the rest is up to you. Before disappearing, Wang Lu left a final sentence. Falling endlessly. After falling out of the chariot, Wang Lu and Faceless One fell into an endless fall in the vast sea of clouds. All around them were vast clouds, and only the strong sense of weightlessness reminded the two that they were falling. Moreover, the speed was getting faster and faster, completely without any wind resistance. What an interesting move. It's beyond my expectations. While falling, Faceless One earnestly nodded and said, "Are you really not worried that I'll erase Luli, and then both of us will suffer?" Beside Faceless One, Wang Lu had a serious look on his face. His attention was firmly locked on Faceless One's body, paying attention to any subtle movement. Upon hearing Faceless One's question, Wang Lu was surprised. "Why should I worry? Isn't your goal from the beginning? Right now, there's no interference from other people, which should be what you want." Faceless One was slightly surprised. "I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. If it were other people, perhaps they would think that Faceless One's goal was to intercept Wang Lu and his team, so that they couldn't get close to beautiful unique Pool Peak and win this trial." However, Wang Lu himself was very clear that Faceless One's real goal was him, only him. He didn't care whether the administrator of the king's treasure house would be replaced or not. As the church's executioner, his task was to purify the enemies of the church. Other things were not within the scope of his consideration. As for Aya, if it was the Night King Aya, perhaps he could use all kinds of means to purify her. However, now that she was in the state of the brave departed, it was not worth it to make a special trip. Therefore, when the time was ripe, Wang Lu immediately pulled him to jump out of the vehicle, so that Aya, Xiaobai, and the others could get rid of the burden and rush forward. Then, the game really began. Chapter 346. Yes, my goal, from the beginning, is you. Faceless One said while adjusting his posture in the fall. Those idiots can't see the situation clearly, they only know how to chase the immediate trivial interests. What king's treasure house, world destroyer Black Dragon, a bunch of ignorant fools. What's the difference between losing and gaining those things? Would the church fall apart after losing the king's treasure house? Would the church be able to sit back and relax after eliminating the decadent Breton Dragon clan? What a joke! Wang Lu said with a smile. Then, in your opinion, what should we do to make Holy Light religion last through the ages? It's very simple, as long as all the threatening opponents are purified. In this world, from small individuals to large countries, the way of survival is like this. Compared to Breton Dragon clan, you, a foreigner, are more qualified to be called a powerful enemy. Holy Light religion has been in a difficult situation this time. In addition to the heathen city-states in the east, the biggest variable is you. Those idiots think that because your level is not high, they can ignore it. I don't think so. Throughout history, I don't know how many huge empires and organizations were destroyed in the hands of a rapidly growing genius. And you obviously have such potential. Even if you can't subvert the Holy Light, your threat is still far away in the Breton Dragon clan. Wang Lu said, actually, I also think so. Therefore, I always think that, compared to the painstaking effort to purify those ready-made powerful enemies, it's better to take advantage of the fact that those geniuses haven't fully grown yet, so that we can get twice the result with half the effort. I feel the same way. My only regret is that on the day of the Battle of Dragon City, I didn't see your threat in time. Otherwise, with my complete strength, even if the Night King was by your side, she still wouldn't be able to save your life. Faceless One's complete form was the strongest person in Holy Light religion below the legendary level, so his words were quite convincing. Later on, I was severely injured by the Night King, which is difficult to recover in a short period of time, and the idiots in the church are not worth relying on. Therefore, I had to take some risks and personally deal with this woman, and sure enough, I succeeded in one fell swoop. The fall of Luli was an undeniable mistake on Wang Lu's part. Despite the fact that the one who made the move was a holy light purifier whose strength was far above Wang Lu's, and despite the fact that Faceless One's method was so strange that even Aya couldn't see through it, these were not reasons for him to excuse himself. Hearing Faceless One mention this matter, Wang Lu's eyes became gloomy. Faceless One said, "At that time, I occupied her mind and planted a seed in her mind. Actually, it was quite difficult. Because of her poor state, I almost failed and implicated her body. And even if she succeeds, there will be many flaws left. Once you notice something unusual, you can investigate her mind over and over again, and it will be hard to guarantee that there won't be any flaws. Therefore, at that time, I used 2 layers of camouflage. The simplest is the drink. Although it looks suspicious, it's actually just an ordinary drink. However, because it looks too suspicious, it will more or less affect your judgment. As a truly intelligent person, you will never think yourself clever and give up the investigation just because it looks too obvious. I believe that you have also seriously investigated whether Luli has any signs of poisoning. Unfortunately, it's non-toxic. As for the second layer of camouflage, it's my words, making you think that I'm trying to manipulate her mind. Of course, this layer isn't completely a camouflage. If she's really stupid enough to act on her own and not listen to commands in battle, displaying some sacrificial spirit, I'll be more than happy to see her die a tragic death, and then deal a fatal psychological blow to you. Your mind is very strong, but if this woman really sacrifices herself for you, you will not be able to bear the blow. Wang Lu coldly said, "Unfortunately, I will not give you that opportunity." Of course you won't, but so what? The spirit of sacrifice is just my camouflage. Moreover, it has successfully deceived you, making you think that my means only stop there, making you ignore the real key. Faceless One said, his tone becoming more and more sarcastic, "This woman is really interesting. Although it seems that her mind world is pure and untainted, which is the most difficult thing to succeed. But in fact, deep in her heart, the entanglement is far more than other people. Moreover, this entanglement is something that even you, her closest senior brother, haven't seen, or even discovered. When I was seriously injured, my spirit occupation could not even exert 1/10 of its power. Even an ordinary middle-order profession may not be able to successfully occupy my mind. Yet, I was able to succeed against her. The flaw in her mind is so big that it even surprised me." Faceless One went on and on. The more he talked, the more proud he became. Then, as her senior brother, don't you want to know where exactly her flaw is? Ha ha ha, no need to deny it, you must want to. I can see that this woman has been heavily influenced by you in all aspects. Her mode of thinking, her mental defense, a large part of it was constructed by you. You taught her what is important and what is not, what needs to be done with all her might, and what can be ignored. You think that the defense you designed for her is perfect enough, so you can't figure out where exactly I made my move, am I right? I'd like to hear the details. Wang Lu did not put on airs. Seeing that the other party seemed to be able to show off, he simply asked seriously. Ha ha ha, actually, the reason is very simple. It's because she likes you. Wang Lu was slightly stunned. Is it news that she likes me? Of course she likes me. Because she likes you, so she also hopes that you can like her. Wang Lu said, "Of course I like her, she should be very clear about that." Faceless One's voice became a bit colder. Of course she knows, but what she knows is that your liking is like a brother and sister. You like her, and you also like many other people around you. However, what she wants is not this kind of liking. Wang Lu was even more stunned. Not this kind of liking? Then what does Luli want? Or perhaps, with her IQ, can she distinguish the difference between so many kinds of liking? Although Wang Lu did not speak, the subtle changes on his face were captured by Faceless One. Faceless One suddenly laughed wildly. However, in the accelerated fall, his laughter became distorted and strange. Ha 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 ha. Do you think this woman is simple and ignorant of worldly affairs, so she doesn't understand anything and her heart is blank? No wonder my spirit occupation has been lurking for so long, yet you can't even detect a clue. It turns out that you don't really understand her, or rather, you don't even try to understand her. Because she is simple and straightforward, you self-righteously think that everything about her will be at your mercy, that everything about her is under your control. Unfortunately, even I, who is the best at playing with human nature, would not be so arrogant and conceited. Faceless One continued, what she wants is a more intimate relationship between the two of you than the current one. But she knew that it would only bring you trouble, so she never took the initiative to open her mouth. She didn't even show the slightest sign in front of you. But, when you and other girls laughed together, when you risked your life and death to come to Bretonia for the sake of other women, do you think her heart didn't have any billows? Wang Lu was silent for a long time. Lu Li's heart is pure and untainted. I'm afraid it's not that easy to make her jealous and hateful. Faceless One shrugged and said, yes, this woman's heart is pure and untainted. Even after the spirit occupation, I can't let her have hatred, loathing, and other negative emotions. However, pure and untainted does not mean that there is no 7 emotions and 6 desires, nor is it forever calm and without entanglement. In other words, a girl's entanglement in love is one of the most beautiful emotions of human beings, so it's not dirt at all. This time, Wang Lu was really shocked. Unexpectedly, a pervert like you is actually an expert in love and marriage. If jesting can make you stick to your heart, then you can continue to try. Faceless One sarcastically said, do you think I'm showing off my ability to play with people's heart by saying so much to you? I just want you to clearly see your own stupidity, see your own dereliction of duty, and then, under the guilt, bombard your heart to pieces. Wang Lu sighed. You're right, this matter is indeed worthy of my guilt. When I was on the mountain, I was entrusted by Uncle to train Lu Li, teaching her a lot of knowledge. However, I never taught her the psychology of love, which led to a fatal flaw in her knowledge structure. And this time, you actually took advantage of this to enter her. When I go back from this trip to the West, I must open this course for her, and then teach her physiological health, so that later on, she won't be fed a banana or see a goldfish without knowing it. Oh? Faceless One curiously asked, do you think you still have a chance to go back? Nonsense. Wang Lu suddenly became impolite and coldly responded to Faceless One's question. Otherwise, why do you think I want to listen to your nonsense? Where do you think we landed? Faceless One was startled. He glanced around, but his line of sight was completely blocked by the clouds, unable to see what was going on. Don't try, without the help of the level 8 vehicle, I can't see anything. Lu Li's perception is not much stronger than mine, and now that she's seriously injured by you, she can't see anything. Without the help of the level 8 vehicle, he couldn't see anything. However, Wang Lu had been controlling the Golden King's vehicle until not long ago. Yes, this is the endless sea. As soon as his voice fell, the clouds dispersed, and an endless blue ocean appeared under their feet. The howling wind on the sea wrapped the two people. If you want to eliminate me, a genius who is a huge threat to the church, then now is the time. With a calm smile, Wang Lu crashed into the sea, setting off huge waves. Not far from Wang Lu, Lu Li, who was occupied by Faceless One, also fell into the sea. However, Lu Li, who was controlled by Faceless One, didn't have Wang Lu's non-phase method to protect her body. After falling into the sea, the powerful impact immediately made her dizzy, and her body shook, almost breaking her internal organs. When she came back to her senses, Wang Lu had disappeared. And the location of Faceless One was not in the desolate underwater world, but in a dark green abandoned ancient city. Is this the legendary lost city of Atlantis? Faceless One looked around and was surprised to find that there were familiar marks on the buildings of the ancient city ruins. There's actually a passage to the endless sea inside the sea of clouds? It shouldn't be such a coincidence, right? No, Atlantis has been lost for tens of thousands of years, and no one has been able to find it. Perhaps the endless sea has already been. However, the main task now is to purify the heretic. Unfortunately, the time was too short, so it was too late to occupy his spirit. It's rare that he has already revealed a flaw. However, by choosing the battlefield in Atlantis, does he think he has a chance? Faceless One lightly said. Because his expression was stiff, it was impossible to see his inner activity. However, even he himself didn't realize that the wounds on his right hand that he deliberately cut off were rapidly healing. Chapter 347. Wang Lu, calm down, calm down. Everything that can be done has been done. The situation has been laid out. Now, victory or defeat will be decided by this. In the deep sea, Wang Lu quietly stood on the wreckage of a palace in the ruins of the ancient city. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of bitter seawater to calm his mind. Next, he could not afford to make the slightest mistake in his every move. There was no room for error. Lu Li being plotted against was indeed beyond his expectation. The various protective measures that the sect elders put on Lu Li did not work. However, when he thought about it, it was not strange. The opponent was a near-legendary profession. Moreover, this was the Western continent, where the rules were different, so it was not surprising that there would be an accident. Therefore, any prior precaution was not secure. Only by perfectly adapting to the situation could he protect Lu Li. Regarding Wang Lu's ability to deal with situations, everyone was very assured, including Wang Lu himself, who was also full of confidence. Unfortunately, in the end, there was still an accident. Moreover, it was an accident that Wang Lu could not absolve himself from. He thought of all the factors, but he did not expect that Lu Li's young girl feelings would actually kill her. And this was not Lu Li's responsibility. Wang Lu, as her guardian, must take full responsibility. However, the more critical the situation was, the less time he had for self-blame. Even if it was a sin that could not be redeemed by 10,000 deaths, he must first deal with the opponent, and then consider how to punish himself. The situation was far from desperate. Although Faceless One held the hostage, Wang Lu also had a card in his hand. Moreover, it was a card that, in theory, was enough to crush everything. He had the support of Golden King. Without Golden King's acquiescence and secret help, his starting point in the Sea of Clouds might not necessarily be the Demon Castle, and outside the castle, it might not be that easy to find the abandoned chariot of Golden King. And the most important thing was, without Golden King's acquiescence, there would be no detailed map of the Sea of Clouds in the chariot. This was common sense that was easily overlooked. Even a slightly high-grade chariot would record the journey. Wang Lu's biggest goal in scavenging was not the chariot itself, but the journey that the chariot recorded. At the same time, this was also a secret that Wang Lu didn't tell anyone. When he took control of the chariot, he found that Golden King had indeed recorded his route to and from beautiful unique Pool Peak in the chariot's device. Although Golden King didn't explore the whole picture, he had recorded 60% of the terrain along the way. This map was a real priceless treasure. And the icing on the cake was that Golden King even thoughtfully marked some key locations on the map. This was the reason why Wang Lu dared to take the risk alone. The Endless Sea, the forgotten city of Atlantis. This was the place that Wang Lu had chosen to reverse the situation according to the Golden King's markings during the short confrontation. It was also the only opportunity that he could grasp. "Liuli, wait for me," as he muttered to himself. Wang Lu tightened his grip on the final trump card in his hand. Atlantis, the forgotten city, the ruins abandoned by the gods. At the other end of the city ruins, a stiff-faced girl slowly walked. Relying on her own perception, she tracked the traces of Wang Lu while coldly glancing around. As her body moved, she vaguely felt bursts of pressure. Legend has it that Atlantis was once the pinnacle of civilization in the Western continent. The dreamlike city was not even inferior to the legendary Penglai immortal domain in 9 regions. However, just like the Age of Chaos calamity in 9 regions, which destroyed the vast majority of the immortal civilization, Atlantis also sank permanently in this catastrophe. Rumor has it that Atlantis, because of its overly developed civilization, became arrogant and insufferably arrogant. The people of Atlantis were disrespectful to the gods, and thus were punished by the gods of the western continent. Moreover, it was a permanent punishment. In the city of Atlantis, they would never receive the gift of the gods, only the wrath and curse of the gods. Of course, the legend was just a legend. Atlantis was destroyed tens of thousands of years ago, and the history of Holy Light religion was probably not that long. However, being in it, Faceless One could clearly feel the magical power of this place. It was the rejection of the divine power. The object of worship of Holy Light religion was the Sea of Holy Light, not the personification of the gods. However, since it was a religion, it also had something in common with the religion that worshipped the gods. The power of Holy Light was essentially a kind of divine power, so it seemed reasonable for it to be rejected in the city of Atlantis. Was this what Wang Lu was sure of? Did he choose this battlefield that was favorable to the pagans to try to make a comeback? A very clever idea. The rejection of the holy light in the ruins of Atlantis was firm and without any gap. The ubiquitous repulsive force made the parasitic Faceless One feel the pressure, which made it difficult for him to maintain a perfect spiritual occupation of Lu Li. This left an opportunity for Wang Lu. If it was a one-on-one showdown in the ruins, Faceless One could not guarantee that he would not reveal his flaws. In case Wang Lu used some method to expel him from Lu Li's body, the situation would be instantly reversed. While thinking, Faceless Demon had already captured Wang Lu's position. He was hiding in an abandoned palace, ready to make a move. It seemed that he was waiting for her arrival, but it also seemed that he might rush out at any time, which caught her off guard. Faceless One did not continue to move forward, nor did he use the hostage to force Wang Lu to come out. He gently shook his head and inwardly sneered. Taking advantage of the geographical advantage of Atlantis was really a naive idea. Because he did not intend to have a one-on-one fight with Wang Lu. Previously, he used the hostage because there was no other way to catch up with him. But now that he had been dragged out of the vehicle, the rest of the work could be handed over to the laborers. Faceless One did not trust Paul, Ferdinand, and the others, but when needed, he would not reject using their power. Humph, it's time to let those idiots play their role. Then, he used the connection between his avatar and his main body to send a signal. At the same time, in another place in the Sea of Clouds, the Holy Chariot was moving at top speed. Because of the overload, the energy core was constantly groaning, which made the atmosphere inside the chariot particularly anxious. Faceless, why haven't we caught up with them after chasing for so long? Didn't you say they stopped? Paul asked anxiously. When he heard that Wang Lu and his team had obtained the inheritance of Golden King, a level 8 vehicle, Paul could not help but panic about the prospect. He had long known that as the administrator of the king's treasure house, he was not liked by Golden King. If not for Golden King's remnant soul, which had lost the actual control of the treasure house, he would have been expelled by Golden King long ago. And this time, in the face of Wang Lu's challenge, he had no doubt that Golden King would secretly make his move. Once he let Wang Lu break through, the administrator title would inevitably change hands. At that time, his situation would be worse than death. Seeing that Faceless One was silent inside the vehicle, Paul could not help but say, "Faceless, this is not just about me, but about the development of the entire holy religion." Found it. Faceless One suddenly opened his mouth and then pointed to a certain direction in the Sea of Clouds. "Go there, they are hiding there." Paul's spirit was shaken. "Good, everyone, let's work harder. As long as we intercept those heretics, we will win." Under the urging of Paul, the holy chariot sped up a bit. Under the extreme speed, the body of the chariot constantly trembled, as if it could fall apart at any time. However, it was bound by the joint efforts of several people inside the chariot, wrapped in a powerful holy light, and could not break free. Before long, the chariot broke through the layers of Sea of Clouds and came to a blue ocean. What is this place? The place where the enemy is hiding. Faceless One didn't explain more. He just led the chariot straight into the sea, and then, in the monstrous waves, went straight into the deep sea area, where Atlantis was located. After approaching Atlantis, the city ruins rejected the holy light, which made the holy light religion people vigilant. What is this place? How could it reject the power of the holy light so much? Ferdinand was surprised to find that his power, which was suppressed by the sea of clouds, had actually dropped by half a level. Paul fiercely said, "Cunning heretics! To hell with this savage land!" Amidst the curse, the group of people finally landed at the designated location of Faceless One. In the square of the ruins, the holy cabin door opened, which caused the entire overburdened chariot to shake. The group of people impatiently rushed out of the chariot, but they didn't find any trace of the heretics. Ferdinand asked in a cold voice, "Faceless, where the hell are they?" "Over there." In the deep sea, the voice became a bit strange, but Ferdinand could still hear that it was a crisp and sweet voice of a woman. He turned his eyes and saw a beautiful but vaguely familiar girl slowly walking over. She had a near-perfect figure, but for some reason, her right hand was missing 5 fingers. The Supreme Inquisitor was stunned, and then he realized, this is the trophy of your spirit occupation, and also your card? Using spirit occupation to capture the hostage and then using the hostage to threaten the opponent to surrender was a common trick of Faceless One. Although it was old-fashioned, it was tried and tested. Faceless One was too lazy to answer and just said, "The target is in that palace. You guys go and purify him. Ferdinand, you stay here with 2 archbishops to protect the hostage. 3 archbishop-level death soldiers, plus the good-for-nothing Paul, who was still a holy one." With the 4 of them joining hands, no matter how great his ability was, Wang Lu would still end up dead. However, Faceless One did not relax his vigilance. He refused to give Wang Lu even the slightest chance. Obviously, it was already a fatal situation, yet he still arranged a heavy force around the hostage, leaving no flaws. Soon, Paul led the 3 archbishops into the palace, while the Supreme Inquisitor led the remaining 2 archbishops to guard Faceless One's side. At this time, Faceless One suddenly smelled a strange fragrance. It was indistinct and at the same time, it was also disturbed by many noisy smells in the deep sea, making it difficult to identify it. "Do you smell anything?" Faceless One asked Ferdinand. The latter twitched his nose and frowned. "It seems to be the fragrance of meat." Faceless One was stunned. The deep sea abandoned city couldn't even light a fire, so where did the fragrance of meat come from? Ferdinand's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. In addition to praying to the holy light, one of his hobbies was food. Therefore, he had a strong ability to recognize this smell. "This smell seems to be the cooking method of those yellow-skinned bastards. I remember it's called pork stewed with vermicelli. Moreover, they added a lot of vinegar, so it's very sour. Pork stewed with vermicelli. How can there be the smell of pork here?" However, before he could think too much, Faceless One suddenly felt that the body that was occupied by his spirit was somewhat out of his control. A strong will boiled inside his body, and his previously heavily injured right arm involuntarily lifted up. 5 fingers were cut off, and from the hollow of his palm, a dense sword chi, like a simple and unadorned flying sword that wanted to pierce the blue dome of heaven, flew out. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword pierced through Ferdinand's chest and came out of his back. A transparent hole suddenly opened up. Chapter 348. Ferdinand had always distrusted Faceless One, but he believed in his devotion to the holy light. He also believed that as long as they had the same belief and the same goal, they would have the opportunity to travel together. Therefore, he never thought that one day the other side would suddenly change sides. This blow was so fast and ruthless that he simply had no time to react. The severe wound on his chest shocked Ferdinand. The Supreme Inquisitor incredulously looked at Faceless One and then looked down at his wound. The wound caused by the flying sword showed no sign of healing. Originally, with the Supreme Inquisitor's legendary level strength, even if his body was torn apart, he could quickly regenerate it. However, at this time, he was suppressed by both sides, and his strength was only at the intermediate high-order level. Moreover, this sword contained an irresistible penetrating force. The wound was constantly eroded by the adhering force, completely unable to recover. What was even more fatal was that the tip of the sword seemed to be coated with a highly toxic poison. The Supreme Inquisitor's strength quickly dissipated from the wound, completely irreparable. It was as if this was a long-planned assassination, and the strong targeting was frightening. Faceless, you. The Supreme Inquisitor struggled to maintain his standing posture. He wanted to ask why Faceless One plotted against him. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, blood gushed out, and he was completely unable to speak. The next moment, he was even more desperate to see the two archbishops fall beside him. It turned out that the power of the sword just now was beyond his imagination. At the same time that the sword pierced his chest, the aftermath dispersed, and the unparalleled sword wind cut off the heads of the two archbishops. 3 kills in one sword, 3 kills in one sword. How could there be such a sharp sword in this world? With intense astonishment, the Supreme Inquisitor's line of sight fell into darkness. And the one who was also shocked by this sword strike was Faceless One himself. Why? What's going on? Although Faceless One was experienced and knowledgeable, he was also shocked by this sudden change. His spirit occupation of Luli should be absolute. Even if in Atlantis City, his spirit occupation was suppressed, he still had absolute confidence that it would not leave any opportunity for him to take advantage of. The consciousness of Luli has obviously been suppressed by him in the deepest darkness, and the most likely to erupt at several points: the yearning for Wang Lu, the attachment to her master, and the desire for swordsmanship, were all blocked by his spirit occupation. But just now, a powerful will erupted like a volcano. It was unstoppable, and it directly penetrated his rule. It took over his body's right hand and summoned a flying sword that had been hibernating in his body, Skybreaker. Skybreaker was the weapon that Luli obtained from the ancient sword tomb. It was once a famous immortal sword in 9 regions. Although the sword's spirit had fallen, its sharpness did not diminish in the slightest. Wherever the sword touched, there was nothing that it could not destroy. Even the Supreme Inquisitor would find it difficult to escape. Moreover, this sword came too suddenly, and no one could react in time. Without taking any precautions, who in the world would dare to go head-on against the edge of an immortal sword? After that sword strike, Faceless One tried his best to suppress the right hand that had gone berserk. However, once this force broke out, it was difficult to control. Especially after the Skybreaker was unsheathed, its sharpness was unparalleled. His spirit occupation was ineffective, and instead, the force that he left in Lu Li's body was constantly weakened. As for the Skybreaker, after the full power of the one-sword triple kill, although it was indeed a bit weak, its sharpness was still sharp. Faceless One's body was seriously injured by Aya's sword strike, and then he risked his injury to use his spirit occupation. Actually, he was already in a precarious situation. He had no fighting ability at all, so he didn't dare to be too close to the berserk Skybreaker. Therefore, while trying his best to maintain the spirit occupation, Faceless One quickly retreated. However, before he could even take 2 steps back, he saw that his out-of-control right hand suddenly thrust the sword back, as if he wanted to commit suicide. Faceless One was inwardly shocked. How could he dare to let this sword stab him? If Lu Li really committed suicide, Wang Lu was likely to activate his life-saving prop to withdraw from the scene. Those 10 spirit sword heavenly talismans. Faceless One didn't think that Wang Lu was really faking it. The reason why he placed such a large force around Lu Li was to use the hostage to contain Wang Lu, so that he couldn't leave, and could only be besieged to death. Therefore, seeing that Lu Li's consciousness was awakened for some unknown reason, and at the same time, she intended to commit suicide, Faceless One immediately made a decision to stop her no matter what. His main body was here. As long as he merged with his avatar, the power of his spirit occupation would be further strengthened, and he would certainly be able to suppress the berserk will of Lu Li. However, the skybreaker in Lu Li's hand was too powerful. Although it was a dead object, there was still a trace of Sword Demon's aura on it. Although it was only a trace, it could still force Faceless One, who was not in a complete state, to be unable to approach it. If Faceless One had to force his way closer, he would definitely be injured by the skybreaker. The situation was extremely awkward, but Faceless One's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that brute force was not going to work, he immediately changed his mind and shouted, "If you dare to commit suicide, your senior brother's life will not be guaranteed." Lu Li's berserk right hand suddenly stopped. Faceless One was inwardly shocked. Lu Li's stimulation was really not light. Resuscitation of her consciousness had unexpectedly reached the point where she could recognize the dialogue. Moreover, with the continuous resuscitation of her consciousness, the power of her spirit occupation continued to weaken, and it seemed like she was about to be completely out of control. Was there something special about her mind cultivation method, or was it because of the skybreaker in her hand? For a time, Faceless One was unable to determine. However, resuscitation was also a good thing. Otherwise, it would be difficult to restrain her. "Listen, your senior brother is in that palace, and he has been surrounded by us. If you don't obey, he will die." If it was the normal Lu Li, upon hearing this, she would just snort disdainfully. "Senior brother is so powerful, why should I worry about him? I just need to protect myself, and that would be the biggest help to him." However, at this time, Lu Li was still under Faceless One's spirit occupation, so her consciousness was not clear. She just vaguely felt that she must not let her senior brother be trapped in a dangerous situation. Seeing that Lu Li was stabilized, Faceless One's heart was somewhat at ease. He didn't need Lu Li to be immediately obedient. As long as she was confused and hesitant, it would be enough for Paul and the others to purify Wang Lu. At this time, Paul and the others have been in the palace for some time. With their absolute strength advantage, the outcome of the battle would soon be clear. Sure enough, there was a loud rumbling sound from the ruins of the palace, and most of the palace collapsed under the impact of the huge force. The dust was stirred by the seawater and dispersed in all directions, which carried a strong smell of blood. The desolate and lonely figure of Wang Lu stood on the rubble. He had lost his right arm and left eye, and his whole body was bathed in blood. However, his left hand was still holding the sword, and he still drew out a 3-foot sword defense, resisting all the external forces. He was like a lonely pine tree in a blizzard. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he could not hide his crumbling posture. To be able to persist for a moment under the siege of Paul and the 3 archbishops without dying. Although this was also because most of the power of the Holy Light religion's people were suppressed by the law, Wang Lu's defensive ability was still breathtaking. A young man who had yet to reach King Pill, who had yet to enter high order, could actually withstand several rounds of siege in the face of 4 powerful enemies whose strength was far above that of ordinary high-order cultivators. This kind of powerful defensive ability was simply unheard of. If given time, when he broke through the King Pill and reached Yuanying, perhaps he would be able to walk sideways in the Western continent. Unfortunately, that was a thing in the future, a future that could never appear. "Kill him." Faceless One coldly ordered, showing no mercy. Paul turned around and glared at Faceless One. Inwardly, he was extremely angry. At this moment, how could he not know that he had been deceived by Faceless One? There was no Golden King's level 8 chariot here. The real level 8 chariot had already gone far away and could no longer catch up. Faceless One wasted precious time and opportunity to deal with a young man whose strength was not even worth mentioning. However, at this moment, he had no choice. In addition to Faceless One, no one else could track the enemy's position in the sea of clouds. Even if they wanted to catch up, they couldn't. Moreover, Paul also knew that the young man in front of him was playing the role of the leader. Once he was beheaded, the other side would not be much of a threat. Faceless One's obsession with him was also reasonable. Kill him. Paul roared and, at the same time, silently recited the hymn of the Holy Light in his mind, extracting the power of the Holy Light, which resonated with the 3 archbishops. The Holy Light gushed out from his body and rushed straight up. The 4 of them joined forces to fuse the Holy Light into a small sea of holy light. The pure and clean energy, driven by the thoughts of the 4 people, gradually condensed, deformed, and turned into a sharp sword. The Holy Light sword shone in all directions. Even in the territory of Atlantis, it was still difficult to cover its brilliance. In just a few rounds of fighting, they had already seen that Wang Lu was very good at fighting one against many. Under the non-phase sword defense, there was not much difference between 1 person and 10 people. This was also an important reason why he could persist for several rounds under the siege of 4 people. If they wanted to kill him, they had to fuse their power into a higher level of power and crush all his defenses in one fell swoop. In the face of the Holy Light sword above his head, Wang Lu's complexion was unprecedentedly dignified. Non-phase method was indeed the world's #1 defensive method. No matter which continent, there was no method that could match it. However, non-phase method, after all, was not omnipotent. In the face of such a desperate situation, perhaps non-phase sword. And at this moment, a clear and crisp shout came from afar, and it arrived in the blink of an eye. Senior brother. Wang Lu was startled and turned his head to look. He didn't know when, but Lu Li had completely regained her freedom. With an eager face, she flew through the air. The more than 10 flying swords around her seemed to be overflowing with light. They flowed out from her sleeves and skirt, interweaving into a rainbow, which was too beautiful to behold. However, Wang Lu was not in the mood to appreciate the beauty. He roared, "Lu Li, get out of here." After all the hardships, choosing the right place, personally acting as the bait, and using a strange method to break the spirit occupation, did he want her to die together with him? Seeing that Lu Li got rid of the spirit occupation and even killed Ferdinand and the others, Paul and the others were also surprised. However, seeing her and Wang Lu's reaction, after a moment of surprise, they were pleasantly surprised. They wanted the 2 of them to die together. Therefore, they simply let go of the encirclement and let Lu Li come to Wang Lu's side. Senior brother, Forget it, since you're already here, let's just take things as they come. Wang Lu smiled bitterly. Holding the sword with one arm, he gently held Lu Li in his arms. Around the 2 of them, the people of Holy Light religion gradually surrounded them. In addition to Paul and the other 3, the Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand and the 2 archbishops also came over with pale faces. Although they were just beheaded by Lu Li's sword strike, the gift of Holy Light gave them a chance to come back from the dead. At this time, even though they were weak, they firmly stood on the front line, completely cutting off the hope of survival for Wang Lu and his senior sister. A wonderful performance, full of twists and turns. Faceless One slowly approached them, but when he reached a certain distance, he stopped and cautiously hid behind the protection of his companions. Indeed full of twists and turns. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. I really didn't expect this child to be stupid enough to not know how to cherish the opportunity to escape. Using a strange method to break through the spirit occupation, and then using the Skybreaker to kill 3 people, Lu Li just had the opportunity to escape alone. After all, the other party's focus was on Wang Lu, and when the Skybreaker was officially launched, it also had a considerable suppression effect on the spirit occupation. However, Lu Li resolutely chose to live and die together with him. This was even contrary to common sense, because Wang Lu's education for Lu Li had always been to take care of herself, not to care about others, especially not about him, Wang Lu. However, the first thing that Lu Li did after the resuscitation was to throw the teachings of her senior brother to the back of her head. This reminds me of the words that I said to her on the night of the celebration in Dragon City, Faceless One lightly said. At that time, he instigated Lu Li to sacrifice herself to help Wang Lu with vicious intention. Later on, after being seen through by Wang Lu wanted Lu Li to forget every word of those words. Luli would not pretend to agree but secretly oppose. At that time, she said that she would forget, so naturally, she would forget. However, there were some things that didn't need Faceless One to instigate. When things came to a head, Luli would naturally make the same judgment. Sacrificing herself to help her senior brother, even if, in fact, she couldn't help much. Seeing this, Faceless One only dared to ridicule her in his heart. Senior brother, I didn't listen to your instruction, I'm sorry. Luli seemed to be completely unaware of her situation. Her smile was still as brilliant as a flower. Wang Lu sighed. Forget it, dying together with you can at least help you improve your average IQ. While speaking, he hugged Luli even tighter. His warm body dispelled the coldness of the deep sea. As his body rubbed, a unique stick-like thing quietly rubbed from Wang Lu's waist to Lu Li's lower abdomen. Lu Li's eyes looked down, and through the deep ravine on her chest, she vaguely saw a very familiar thing on her lower abdomen. Although you're disobedient, I'm really glad that you're here. This thing is just right for you to hold in your hand. Take it, Luli obediently stretched out her hand and held that thing tightly. It was the joystick that she had seen on the vehicle. She didn't know when it was pulled down by Wang Lu and brought here. At this time, the fully prepared Holy Light Religion people also made the decision to attack. Kill them. At the same time, Luli held the joystick upside down and held it high. Faceless One's eyes narrowed, and his heart almost stopped. How could it be it? How could it be it? Golden King actually hid this treasure in the vehicle and used it as a joystick? The next moment, a copious amount of energy burst out from the top of the joystick. Luli, holding the short stick, was stimulated by the energy. Her figure involuntarily swelled up, and at the same time, a rough shout burst out from her chest. For _Casmodon. Chapter 349. As the ancient said, the right time, the right place, and the right people were the three magical weapons to win the war. However, for Wang Lu, he didn't have any of these three magical weapons. In terms of the right time, this was the time when Holy Light Religion was fighting on multiple fronts. The whole religion was in high alert. In terms of the right place, the king's treasure house was Holy Light Religion's own backyard. As for the right people, in the face of a group of legends and quasi-legendaries, how could they talk about the right people? Any rational person would not choose to fight against Holy Light Religion in such a situation. However, Wang Lu confidently rushed forward, neither calling for help from his sect nor waiting for a better opportunity to appear. Where did he rely on? Was it really because his immortal cultivation was too smooth that he forgot himself? Wang Lu, of course, was not that stupid. This time, he rushed into the king's treasure house. Although it was a risky move, he was taking a risk and not throwing away his life. He had his own assurance of victory. This assurance was the support of Golden King himself. Wang Lu had enough confidence to win the support of Golden King. First, the two sides had the same interests. Holy Light Religion occupying the king's treasure house was obviously against the will of Golden King himself. However, as a wisp of remnant soul, he did not have the capital to confront it head-on. He was like a king who was a mere figurehead. However, the appearance of Wang Lu gave him the possibility to regain his authority. As a person of 9 regions, it was impossible for Wang Lu to live here for a long time. Therefore, the long-term interests of the two sides were not contradictory. Second, Wang Lu's posture was ingenious. With the pride of Golden King, it was impossible for him to admit that he had lost control of the situation. Therefore, Wang Lu never took the initiative to mention any alliance or assistance. Instead, he cautiously maintained a neither servile nor overbearing attitude, neither appearing greedy nor weak. In the first few trials, he fully demonstrated his talent and repeatedly dealt a serious blow to the usurping minister of Holy Light Religion. As for the secret support of Golden King, he accepted it all without being greedy, this was the attitude of a loyal minister to the king. Third, Wang Lu was talented and his personal ability was against the heaven. He could repeatedly perform miraculous comebacks, which made Golden King very happy. Golden King was naturally willing to generously reward him and support him to continue to move forward. In summary, although the two sides had never made it clear, Wang Lu was confident that he had indeed won the support of Golden King. And as a remnant soul, what was the value of Golden King's support? To Wang Lu, it was priceless. No matter how down and out Golden King was, he was still the master of the treasure house. A little quiet action could benefit people endlessly. Especially from the beginning of the Sea of Clouds, Golden King seemed to fully trust Wang Lu and spared no effort in his support. From the starting point of the Sea of Clouds to the unearthing of the chariot, from the map stored in the station car to the magical joystick. If Wang Lu could win this round, most of the contribution came from Golden King, but this was also a matter of course. Without this kind of support, Wang Lu would not come to court death. And now, Wang Lu turned out the last card that Golden King gave him, which was also the most powerful card. The scepter held by the King of Atlantis, the leader who had once led the people to rebel against the gods. It symbolized that the king would not submit to any god, and the wielder would be immune to all gods' powers. It was simply the perfect nemesis of holy light religion. However, the drawback was that its effectiveness was limited, and in addition to immunity to the divine power, it basically had no other function. Wang Lu held the scepter in his hand for a long time but refused to activate it. It was precisely because for him, even if he could activate the scepter in exchange for a moment of invincibility, he would be powerless to make progress. However, the arrival of Lu Li reversed everything. The girl had an explosive attack that was far beyond her level. Once she gained immunity, she would become an unstoppable war machine. Casmodon. Holding the scepter, Lu Li was stimulated by the power and involuntarily let out a roar. It was a rough roar that completely did not belong to a girl. The sound waves surged through the sea and set off layers of twisted ripples. Facing the sound waves, the faces of the holy light religion believers were aghast. Because under that roar, they actually felt that it was difficult to resist. Their internal organs were shaken out of place, and the blessing of the holy light seemed to have disappeared. If it were other people, perhaps the effect of immunity to the divine power could only be limited to defense. However, for Lu Li with her brilliant sword heart, it was easy for her to extend this power to attack. The next moment, the sword chi that swept through thousands of troops swept across with earth-shattering power. The 5 archbishops who bore the brunt of the attack didn't even have the time to utter a sound before they were swept by the sword chi. Their bodies were as if they were cut into countless pieces by thousands of knives. Paul's face was aghast, but as a holy one, his reaction speed was extremely fast. With a thought, he flashed dozens of miles away into the deep sea area. His life-saving ability was brought into full play. The Supreme Inquisitor's reaction was faster, but he had just been resurrected, so he couldn't be as flexible as Paul. In the face of the sweeping sword chi, he could only hold his own holy object, the ruling sword, in front of his body, hoping that this holy object that was bred in the sea of holy light could resist this disaster for him. However, after a crisp sound, the ruling sword was cut into 2. However, the aftermath of the sword chi hasn't been completely offset, so it cut off half of the Supreme Inquisitor's body. Faceless One was seriously injured, so his performance was even more unbearable. Although he stood at the back, his reaction was also the slowest. After being swept by the sword chi, his body shook and then disintegrated into countless fine powder. Lu Li's full power strike with the scepter was earth-shattering, which had the power to exterminate the holy light religion. 5 archbishops and 1 holy one fell under this sword strike, and Faceless One's body didn't even remain. However, the burden on Lu Li was also extremely heavy. Despite the scepter's support, she still felt a burst of dizziness, and her jade mansion tightened as if it was about to burst. This was a sword strike that completely exceeded her limit. If not for her special physique, this sword strike would have caused her to go berserk. However, seeing that the battle was about to be decided, Wang Lu still didn't stop. He pointed his broken arm forward. Go after Paul. Without hesitation, Lu Li moved according to his order. Her body turned into a rainbow light, and like a lightning, she rushed toward the direction of Paul's escape. Her momentum was like a sword, and the tens of thousands of tons of deep-sea pressure seemed to be nothing, unable to stop her in the slightest. At the same time, dozens of miles away, Paul, who was still in a state of shock, had yet to regain his composure when he saw a bright light approaching from afar, rapidly approaching. With his amazing eyesight, Paul's eyes penetrated the darkness of the deep sea and saw that the person who came was Lu Li. It was just that, after the girl's full power strike, she quickly chased after him, so her consumption was quite severe. Especially since the power of the scepter was also rapidly fading, the girl's body continued to shrink. Being firm and fierce would not last long. Rationally, if Paul turned around and fought back, his winning rate would actually be quite high. Even if he was the most worthless Holy One, he was still a Holy One, so his understanding of power was far above Lu Li. In addition, his own stage was also high, and he gradually got rid of the suppression of Atlantis City. With these several factors combined, he had no reason to be afraid to fight. If it were Ferdinand, he would definitely turn around and fight back. However, Paul had long been scared out of his wits. Seeing that Lu Li was like a hot knife cutting through butter, he turned around and ran, not daring to stay for even a moment longer. However, by a stroke of luck, at the beginning, Lu Li's speed was much faster than his. The distance between the two continued to shorten, and after a while, Lu Li found it difficult to continue. Her speed became slower and slower, and the distance between the two gradually widened. After a while, the power of the scepter completely subsided, and Lu Li returned to normal. The previous overload caused by the internal injury backlash, which made her cough up blood. Seeing this, Paul was overjoyed. If he could catch this woman, he could reverse the situation. However, just as he turned around to capture Lu Li, he heard the rumbling sound of the surging sea behind him, as if there was a terrifying giant approaching at an extremely fast speed. Deep sea beast? There's one here too. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Paul felt a sharp pain in his back, and then a violent impact bombarded him. The next moment, he felt that his body suddenly became light and fragmented. After that, the endless darkness engulfed him. Not far away, Lu Li, who had to stop because of the heavy burden, was surprised to see a burst of golden light in front of her. In the middle of the light, the conical tower was lying flat, like a sharp lance. The tip of the lance was still stained with Paul's body fragments. Aya. Sister, cough, cough. Lu Li slightly opened her mouth, but just as she tried to speak, her mouth was blocked by the blood that gushed out. The girl coughed incessantly, and her slender waist was forced to bend down. Before long, the Night King, who was dressed in military uniform, hugged Lu Li and reached out to stroke her back to soothe her injury. Lu Li, don't talk, leave the rest to me. Okay. The girl nodded, uttered a sweet nasal sound, and then, unable to hold on any longer, fainted. The Night King picked up Lu Li and returned to the chariot. The conical tower slowly rotated and gradually accelerated forward. Before long, they arrived at the ruins of Atlantis. In the middle of the ruins, Wang Lu leaned against a broken stone pillar, half lying on the ground. His whole body was covered with wounds, and he looked desolate and miserable. However, the smile on his face was particularly relaxed. Seeing the slowly approaching chariot, Wang Lu shook his head. Didn't I tell you to take little Bai and the others straight to the finish line and leave me alone? Aya jumped out of the chariot and said with dissatisfaction, You said to leave the rest to me, but you didn't say that we should leave you behind. Wang Lu said, I thought with your perception, you should understand what I'm talking about. Aya gave tit for tat. I thought with your perception, you should understand that I can't leave you alone. TSK, you disobedient ruler of a subjugated country. Hey, people who don't know how to give up can't be successful. When you cook, it's because you don't know how to put less seasonings, and you don't use fire when you should. That's why you always make dark cuisine. Is this how you treat your savior? Wang Lu laughed. I caught an unexpected captive, so I'm in a good mood to make fun of you. Captive? Faceless One. What? Upon hearing that Wang Lu had captured Faceless One, Aya's shock was no less than the moment when Faceless One appeared and his spirit occupied Lu Li. More than 100 years ago, when he was still very weak, the church's sharp knife that could give Aya a headache was actually captured? Faceless One was captured by you? Where? Wang Lu pointed to his head. Here. Chapter 350. Buzz. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, Aya unsheathed her caliban and pointed the sharp blade at Wang Lu. Who exactly are you? While speaking, without waiting for Wang Lu's reply, her sword had already chopped down. Wang Lu was taken aback. He raised the sword of Mount Kun to block Aya's attack and cursed, "What the hell, dead chef, you want to rebel? You can't even recognize me, the one and only returning customer of Spirit Sword Mountain?" Aya resentfully put down the caliban. I thought your spirit was occupied by that guy. To some extent, you two are quite similar. You're really blind. But, did you really capture him? Aya still found it hard to believe. The most difficult thing to deal with Faceless One was that his whereabouts were unpredictable. Not long ago, when she used the caliban to seriously injure him in Dragon City, she still failed to eliminate him, let alone capture him alive. Regarding Aya's suspicion, Wang Lu also sighed with emotion. Faceless One is indeed an exceptionally powerful opponent. This time, when I broke into the king's treasure house, it seemed like I was courting my own death. Actually, with the support of Golden King, I was basically assured of victory. However, because of his appearance, I almost capsized several times. This guy's will to fight is so strong that I've never seen anything like it in my life. Just now, little Lazuli wiped out the entire team with a single sword strike, destroying Faceless' physical body and the spirit he left in Lazuli's body. However, at the moment of crisis, he used his remaining strength to launch a counterattack and targeted me with mind occupation. Huh? Wang Lu said, at that time, the overall situation was just settled, and a normal person's spirit was completely relaxed. Plus, I was seriously injured, and my mood was up and down, so it was easy for him to take advantage of me. It can be said that in the whole battle, the best time to make a move was precisely at the moment when the outcome was already decided. He's indeed a cunning opponent. Aya sighed. Although looking at Wang Lu's appearance, he had properly resolved the final counterattack of Faceless One, listening to him mention the situation just now still made people nervous. However, because that moment was the best time, not only he was clear about it, I was also clear about it. I've been waiting for him for a long time, and I've finally waited for the chance for him to use himself as a gambling stake. After that, there's nothing else to say. In the state of remnant soul, Faceless could not break through the defensive circle of my non-phase method. Under the collision, his soul almost flew away. So, I suppressed him in my non-phase immortal heart. For the time being, he can be regarded as a prisoner. Wang Lu said, seemingly shrugging his shoulders, but the truth was not that simple. Why would Faceless One make a futile struggle? His counterattack at the last moment was exceptionally fierce, almost piercing through Wang Lu's defense and successfully occupying his mind. It could be said that the most dangerous part of this battle was the last moment. However, no matter how thrilling it was already over. Although Faceless One was only a hair away from a comeback, this hair was a world of difference. A victory was a victory, no matter how thrilling it was still a victory. After a moment of silence, Aya asked, "How do you plan to deal with Faceless One?" It just so happened that Wang Lu was also thinking about this question, so he casually replied, "Lock them up in the flesh puppets and humiliate them?" What? Huh? Wang Lu suddenly came to his senses. Remembering that Aya has always been an upright person, he corrected himself. I mean to influence him with justice and benevolence, to let him put down the butcher's knife. Aya felt that Wang Lu was simply looking down on her IQ. Wang Lu sighed. To be honest, I'm also very embarrassed. No matter how cruel the torture method is, compared to what he did, I still feel that my imagination is insufficient. With that, Wang Lu cast a glance at the still unconscious Lu Li. Although the wound on the girl's right hand had healed, her once slender fingers haven't been regenerated. Lu Li was a sword cultivator, so the importance of her fingers couldn't be even the slightest bit of mistake. Therefore, as a medical practitioner, Bai Shixian didn't dare to act rashly. She was waiting for the situation to stabilize and then seriously prepare for the treatment. Alas, the girl's slender jade-like hand has turned into a doraemon. It really breaks people's heart. Aya curiously asked, what is a doraemon? Wang Lu was also taken aback. Hey, in the face of little Lu Li's injury, you actually care about doraemon? No wonder people say that the Night King has no humanity. Aya was flabbergasted and felt extremely ashamed. Wang Lu sighed. Right now, I intend to simply take him back to the sect and let the Heavenly Sword Hall elders deal with him. After all, they are all experienced people, so I believe that with my master's deep lower limit, they would certainly contribute something new. Thinking of the famous fifth elder of Spirit Sword Mountain, especially her abnormal lower limit, Aya couldn't help but feel a chill. Moreover, this faceless one has so many secrets, wouldn't it be a pity to just kill him like that? If I don't squeeze out all of his remaining value, I would feel sorry for my hard work. Yes, I really can't let him off too easily. Thinking of the past and recent enmity, Aya didn't have any sympathy. She seriously nodded in agreement. At present, I'll try my best to lock him up. This guy's means are strange and changeable. If he escapes, all my previous efforts would be wasted. Wang Lu said. Although he was reluctant, he still earnestly operated his non-phase method to stabilize his immortal heart. So, do you want to continue? Aya looked at Wang Lu's scarred body and couldn't help but ask, can you still hold on? Wang Lu scolded, when a woman asks a man this kind of question, do you expect to get a second answer? Of course I can. While saying that, he staggered to stand up. His robe was torn, his body was full of scars, and he looked unprecedentedly embarrassed. Aya sighed and then silently reached out her hand to support Wang Lu. Yo, left hand Lu Li, right hand me, left hand embracing both men and women, really worthy to be the Night King. Aya said, if you say that again, I'll leave you behind. After returning to the war chariot, Wang Lu really couldn't drive, so he calmly recuperated in the corner. Bai Shixian was next to him, healing his injury, but the recovery speed was very slow. Aya inserted the scepter in Lu Li's hand back into the control panel and complained, you said you'll leave it to me, but before you left, you pulled the joystick away and almost destroyed our chariot. It doesn't matter, I already knew that a person as tough as you would definitely find something to put back. Aya shook her head and no longer paid attention to Wang Lu. Instead, she concentrated on operating the chariot. The chariot contained the map left by the Golden King, so the direction was very clear. The chariot rushed out of the deep sea, and before long, it returned to the main road and rapidly moved forward in the sea of clouds. Along the way, without any words, Wang Lu closed his eyes and operated his non-phase immortal heart, suppressing Faceless One until he couldn't move. After the non-phase immortal heart stabilized, Wang Lu opened his eyes. The tower-shaped chariot had traveled half the distance, and the journey was smooth. And with the help of Bai Shixian, the King Pill-level god healer, Lu Li's injury was also stabilized, which finally made people feel relieved. However, although he was relieved, Wang Lu still couldn't help but feel heavy. This time, Lu Li was in danger, but thanks to a bit of luck, she was finally able to reverse the situation. Although she had the support of the Golden King, every step was still cautious. After all, the person involved was Lu Li, so he couldn't help but worry. This accident was no doubt due to the means of Faceless One, and Wang Lu was also thoughtless. However, the root cause was that Lu Li, a person with brilliant sword heart and clear mind, unexpectedly had such a big psychological defect, which was really unexpected. Unexpectedly, because of her lovesickness period, she was actually taken advantage of by others. What a gaffe this was. Wang Lu didn't like to care about what had happened. Everything must be looked forward. Since he saw the defect in Lu Li, then he must find a way to make up for it. This love psychology and physical health education. When he returned to the mountain, he must earnestly teach it by example, so that this fool would remember it for the rest of her life. However, remembering that in the battle just now, this fool disregarded his previous teachings, resolutely gave up the opportunity to escape alone, and returned to live and die together with him, Wang Lu couldn't persuade himself to scold her anymore. If not for her disobedience, Wang Lu wouldn't have the means to stage a shocking comeback. Along the way, there was only the slight buzzing sound of the chariot. Aya held the joystick, maintaining the same direction. By the way, Wang Lu. Halfway through the journey, the chariot driver Aya suddenly asked, "Don't you think the rules here are strange? Why do we have to take the chariot to go forward? At present, we have already passed 3/4 of the journey, but I don't think we need to rely on external forces to break through those traps. Even if the strength of the participants is limited here, it's not so difficult that it can't be overcome." Wang Lu said, "Your artistic and fresh behavior of sitting in the chariot and feeling the relaxed environment of the outside world is very shameful. No, I'm really strange. You see, the rule that we have to take the chariot to enter the Sea of Clouds is even earlier than when Golden King took this place as his own. That is to say, it's not tailor-made by Golden King for us, but a rule that existed a long time ago. But what is the reason for the existence of this rule? Who set this rule?" Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. After thinking about it carefully, he silently took out a rope and a helmet from his mustard seed bag. He put on the helmet and then tied himself to the ground with the rope with one hand. "What is this?" Aya asked doubtfully. Wang Lu said with a smile, "Nothing, I just remembered that we should wear a helmet and a seatbelt for safety. You continue to drive, I'll help Lu Li and the others. I have a bad feeling about this. Next, I'll have to trouble you to aim at the direction of beautiful unique Pool Peak and increase the speed of the chariot to the limit. Don't worry about it even if it will hurt the body." "What's going on?" While tying Lu Li to an object, Wang Lu replied, "At least from the current clues, the biggest possibility that I can think of is that there is an obstacle that cannot be overcome by manpower near beautiful unique Pool Peak. When people reach this obstacle, they will lose their ability to move. During this period, they must rely on the inertia and defense of the chariot to rush through. Our predecessors, who built the castle and other transit stations, discovered this problem in the process of exploring the Sea of Clouds. Therefore, they simply set the rule that people without a chariot don't have to go to the Sea of Clouds to die. In other words, it won't be long before we face the first impact, so I'll have to trouble Master to drive faster." Seeing that Wang Lu had tied the ropes for everyone except her, the driver, Aya couldn't wait to pull out the joystick and beat him. However, the next moment, an invisible impact came head-on. Aya's vision turned black and she suddenly lost all consciousness. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.